Hey everyone, if you keep watching these stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and become part of the Creepy crew. Big thanks to everyone who's already subscribed. I seriously appreciate you. Now let's get into it. I was studying film in college and wanted to pull off something flashy for April Fools. My friends were always down for some crazy idea, so we met up at a buddy's apartment to brainstorm. I pitched a prank on this guy we all knew, Max. He'd been talking lately about how sketchy his neighborhood got, and how he'd finally bought something for self-defense. Said there'd been a string of home break-ins nearby. Everyone acted like it wasn't that serious, like he was overreacting. So we figured this would make a great social experiment kind of prank. Scary, but harmless. We ordered a few cheap Halloween costumes from an online store. Black hoodies, ski masks, the whole cliché. I also bought these fake rubber knives that looked real enough in low light. The goal was to freak him out just enough to catch a good reaction on camera, then reveal the prank before anything got too far. I had 3 cameras ready. 1 handheld, 1 GoPro strapped to a friend's chest, and 1 tiny one I planned to mount near the back door. I wanted multiple angles to cut together a funny, cinematic reveal, like a mini horror short with a twist ending. Honestly, at first, it felt like it'd be the funniest thing we'd do all semester. We knew Max lived alone in this old 2-story house his aunt let him stay in. No roommates, just him and his laptop and a dog that barked too much. It made the setup easier. No chance of surprising the wrong person. The plan was tight. Wait until he was asleep, sneak in from the back, stage a mock break-in, throw a few fake threats around, then rip off the masks and yell "April Fools," while the cameras caught it all. I figured it'd be gold. The night before the operation, we all met up in the half-lit garage of one of the guys, Trevor. That's where we'd stashed the props. The place smelled like motor oil and old carpet. We cleared out space near the tool rack and laid everything out. Hoodies, masks, knives, gloves. Trevor's little brother kept trying on the mask and jumping out from behind shelves, cracking himself up. Everyone else was hyped, goofing off, laughing. We even ran a few practice takes, pretending to kick down a door and shout, "Where's the money?" It was all dumb, over-the-top stuff. Someone joked we were going to go viral. I was mostly focused on camera positions and timing. I didn't want Max to have enough time to recognize anyone's voice. I told everyone to keep the scene short, 30 seconds max. Come in loud, say some vague stuff to scare him, then hit the punchline. I showed them where to hold the knives so the shadows would look dramatic. We even worked out hand signals for when to reveal ourselves. I wanted full control over the moment. Like, if Max ran or something, I needed to make sure we didn't lose the footage. Underneath all the excitement, I felt this tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. Something about sneaking into someone's home at night didn't sit right. Even with good intentions, it felt like stepping across a line. But I kept thinking, if we're careful, if we do it fast, if we don't touch anything, it's just a joke. Nobody gets hurt. I told myself it'd be like a short film. All make-believe. We double-checked the timeline. Max usually went to bed by midnight. We'd wait until 3 a.m., give him time to be deep asleep. Trevor lived closest, so we'd meet at his place at 2:30, get dressed, and walk the 2 blocks to Max's house. Quiet in, quick scare, loud reveal, and we're out. We even discussed what to do if Max freaked out too much, like if he screamed or tried to run. I said I'd be the one to speak first, keep my tone low, not too threatening, just enough to keep it real. At around 11 that night, I went home and charged all the camera batteries, lined them up on my desk, tested the GoPro with the chest strap on over a hoodie. Watched a few clips from old student prank videos online to see what kind of shots worked best. I packed the props into a gym bag and loaded extra batteries, duct tape and a flashlight just in case. Then I zipped it all shut and set an alarm for 2 a.m. I lay down, fully dressed, not really sleeping, just watching the ceiling. At 2:05, I got up, grabbed the bag, and slipped out the door. By 2:30, I was back in Trevor's garage. The others were already there, some sipping energy drinks, some pulling on gloves. The vibe had shifted a bit. Less joking, more focused. I handed out the masks, made sure everyone had theirs pulled tight. I checked the GoPro, battery full. Trevor took the fake knife with the chipped paint and tucked it into his waistband. We didn't say much now, just nods and short instructions. I handed one camera to Miguel and took the small one to mount on Max's back fence. It was drizzling a little outside, nothing heavy, but enough to make the concrete glisten. We left the garage at 2:45, walked single file, heads down, hoodies up. The neighborhood was dead quiet, just the sound of our shoes and the occasional dog barking in the distance. Max's street was dark, only a few porch lights glowing. We took the alley behind his house, stepping over puddles and trash bins. When we reached the back fence, I motioned for them to stop. I unzipped my bag, took out the camera, and clipped it to a wooden post near the corner, facing the yard. I adjusted the angle until it framed the back door. Then I gave the signal. That night we got to Max's place right on schedule. Only a dim hallway light was on inside. The street was dead quiet, just the hum of a distant car engine somewhere, and the occasional creak of wood as we stepped onto the back porch. One of the cameras was already rolling. I could hear the faint hiss of the mic in my pocket. We moved slow, crouched low, watching for windows, careful not to make a sound that could wake the neighbors. My hands were sweaty, fingers clumsy as I pulled the copy of Max's back door key from my jacket. A guy from our group, Dan, had lived in that same house a year earlier, so he'd had a spare key. I'd made a copy weeks ago for a different short film idea. It didn't take much effort to unlock the door. It clicked open smoother than I expected. We froze a second, listening. Nothing but the low hum of an old refrigerator deeper inside. I stepped in first, camera strapped to my chest, heart beating way too fast. The plan was simple. Storm in, shout something like, "Where's the stash?" or "We know you're in here," and let the chaos kick in. Max would probably scream or fall over, and we'd rip off our masks and yell "April Fools" before he had a chance to think. Dumb, yeah, but we thought it'd work. As I crept forward, I saw the glow from his phone screen on the coffee table. That meant he was probably in the next room, maybe asleep, maybe just dozing. Right then, I got this wave of panic. Just a second, but clear. What if he actually tried to fight back? What if he used whatever weapon he bought? But before I could say anything, Trevor pushed past me, burst into the living room and shouted, "Nobody move!" Everything went sideways in a second. A loud pop, deafening in the enclosed space. It wasn't a sound effect. It was a real gunshot. Chaos exploded. One of the guys, Marcus, fell hard, grabbing at his stomach and gasping. His fake knife clattered across the floor. The scream he let out didn't sound anything like acting. It was wet, broken. I froze for half a second, then ducked down, hands over my head. Max was standing in the hallway in just a t-shirt and boxers, pointing a pistol with both hands, eyes wide and bloodshot. "Don't move!" he shouted. "I'll shoot again!" We all started yelling. Dan crawled to Marcus, trying to stop the bleeding with his hoodie. I yanked off my mask and held my hands up, shouting, "It's just a prank! Max, it's just a prank!" He didn't lower the gun. I don't even think he recognized us yet. The costumes, the masks, the middle-of-the-night break-in, none of it gave him any time to think. Miguel tried to get Marcus into a sitting position. The front of his shirt was soaked. I grabbed my phone and hit 911, stumbling back toward the kitchen to get clearer signal. I couldn't hear the operator at first because of everyone yelling. Trevor screaming for help, Marcus moaning, Max breathing like he'd just sprinted a mile. Finally, Max's arms started to lower. His eyes darted from face to face. "What the hell is this?" he kept saying. "What is this?" He was shaking, lips barely moving. Trevor pulled off his own mask and stepped closer. "It's us, man. We were messing around. We didn't mean..." He didn't finish. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights lit up the front yard. First responders pushed into the house fast. Cops with guns drawn ordered us down. Max dropped his weapon immediately, hands raised, and collapsed onto the floor, muttering, "I didn't know. I didn't know." Paramedics rushed in behind them, wheeled Marcus out strapped to a stretcher. He was conscious but looked like he was fading fast. We were all taken outside, cuffed, sat on the curb while the cops tried to piece it together. The officers looked at us like we were either insane or drunk. Nobody said much. I kept staring at the front porch light, still flickering like it always did. No one made eye contact. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. Every angle was perfect. You could see us entering the house. You could hear the voices, the impact, the screaming. The whole thing was caught clean. No shaky cams, no blur. It looked just like a short film, except it was all real. That became the centerpiece of the court hearing weeks later. The video was shown in full, no edits, no cuts. It showed how we entered without permission, in disguise, carrying realistic-looking weapons. It showed the moment Max fired, and most importantly, it showed how terrified he was. The court ruled in his favor. He acted in self-defense. He had no way of knowing we weren't real intruders. Marcus spent nearly a month in the hospital. He had 2 surgeries. One kidney was damaged. Part of his intestine was removed. The bullet had gone through clean but nicked too much on the way out. He recovered mostly, but the doctors said he'd walk with a limp for life. He dropped out of college afterward, said he didn't want to be anywhere near any of us again. As for me, the college launched a disciplinary hearing. They suspended me indefinitely, said I'd brought disrepute to the institution, endangered students, violated codes of conduct. I tried explaining it was just a prank gone wrong, but the footage was all they needed. No one cared about intentions anymore. My parents were devastated. My dad didn't talk to me for weeks. Friends from high school stopped replying to messages. I got blocked by people I hadn't even spoken to in years. One of the professors I respected most told me, "This isn't a mistake. This was reckless." No one laughed about it after that. The prank that was supposed to be our big April Fool's moment ended up tearing everything apart. We never got back together as a group. Everyone drifted off their own way, most of them too ashamed to even talk about it. I still have the hard drive with all the footage. Haven't watched it since. It's locked in a drawer in my desk. Sometimes I think about deleting it. Other times I think I should keep it, just to remind myself how thin the line is between a joke and a crime, between playing filmmaker and getting someone killed. After a lot of hesitation, I decided to move into a new neighborhood. Quiet streets, neat little houses, and everyone had either a pickup or a small sedan parked neatly on their driveway. It looked like the kind of place where nothing ever really happened. At first, I felt a bit isolated. I didn't know anyone, and even the local grocery store felt unfamiliar, like I was walking into someone else's routine. I kept my head down, stuck to small errands, and tried to settle in without drawing too much attention. About a week in, while walking through the produce aisle one evening, I spotted a face I hadn't seen in over 10 years. Ryan. We used to play ball together in the old neighborhood, just kids running around barefoot in the yard until dark. We both froze when we recognized each other, then laughed like no time had passed. We talked right there next to the bananas for nearly 20 minutes. He said he lived a few blocks away now. Seemed like pure luck. He mentioned his job at a local auto shop, said life was slow but steady. We exchanged numbers, and before we left, he suggested grabbing a beer sometime. I offered my place since I was still unpacking and had more space than furniture. He agreed and said he'd swing by on the weekend. I thought it'd be a good excuse to take a break from organizing boxes and maybe even reconnect a bit with someone who remembered where I came from. April Fool's Day was right around the corner, so I figured we could laugh about the dumb pranks we used to pull, like the time we filled a neighbor's mailbox with shaving cream, or when Ryan taped a fart machine under a teacher's desk in middle school. Just harmless kid stuff. The idea made me feel less alone in the new place. Saturday came, and around 7 p.m., Ryan showed up. But he wasn't alone. He brought two guys I'd never seen before. One was tall, lean, with a buzz cut and a constant twitch in his jaw. The other was heavier, kept adjusting his baseball cap and looking over his shoulder like he was expecting someone to show up. They didn't say much, and Ryan introduced them so fast I barely caught their names. Could have been Mike and Nate. I offered them beers, and we sat around the living room, just making small talk at first. I noticed right away that they weren't interested in conversation. They barely touched their drinks. They kept glancing around the room, at the walls, the corners, the hallway toward the bedrooms. The tall one got up at one point and asked where the bathroom was. I pointed it out, but he took the wrong turn and ended up poking his head into the guest room instead. I didn't say anything, just figured maybe he was confused. But even after he came back, he kept looking toward the hallway like he'd forgotten something in there. The big guy made some offhand comment about how quiet the neighborhood was, how nobody would notice anything out here. He laughed right after, but it didn't feel like a joke. Ryan kept trying to smooth things over, talking about old times, asking if I still had my dad's old tools. I told him I did, out in the garage. That got their attention more than I expected. Eventually, they said they had to head out. I walked them to the door, said goodnight, locked up behind them. It wasn't a bad evening exactly, but it didn't sit right. Like they weren't here to hang out. Like they were checking the place out. For the next couple of days, I kept to my routine. Work was normal. I got up early to run like I always do, said hi to neighbors I passed on the sidewalk, grabbed groceries after work. I even started thinking maybe I was overthinking that whole visit. Maybe they were just weird guys and I was too rusty with social stuff. Then, 4 nights later, around 1:15 in the morning, my phone buzzed. The motion sensor on my front door had gone off. I sat up in bed, checked the camera feed from the app, and my stomach turned. There were 3 guys at my front porch, all in dark clothes, faces covered by ski masks. One of them had gloves on and was trying to do something to the deadbolt. I zoomed in on the video. That's when I saw the eyes, familiar, greenish-gray, with a scar just under the left one. Ryan. I didn't move for a second. I just stared at the screen, watching them try to force the door. He must have figured I lived alone, saw the tools, noticed the lack of security, maybe even peeked into that guest room while pretending to be lost. The 2 guys he brought had followed his lead without hesitation. It was like they'd done this before. I grabbed my phone and called the cops. Kept my voice low, gave the address, told them there were intruders outside. The operator told me to stay on the line and stay inside. I locked the bedroom door, backed into the far corner, and waited. While I was shaking behind the locked door, they didn't manage to break anything. Just kept fumbling with the lock until the sound of a siren cut through the night. I heard them curse, muffled. then the noise of quick footsteps across the porch and into the yard. They were gone before I even made it to the front window. Moments later, the patrol car pulled up with its lights flashing, 2 officers stepping out, scanning the area with flashlights. I opened the door when they knocked, still clutching my phone like a lifeline. They asked a few questions, checked the perimeter, and then I showed them the footage from my phone. One of them watched closely, nodded, and asked if I knew any of them. I said one of them used to be my friend, that I hadn't seen him in years before running into him at the grocery store. It felt stupid saying it out loud. I was the one who invited him in. The officers said they'd pass the video to investigators and advised me to stay cautious, lock everything, install extra lighting if I could. As they drove off, I stood there in my hallway, staring at the door like it might open on its own. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I went around to a few neighbors, asked if anyone saw or heard anything. Most hadn't. But one guy across the street, Jerry, said something weird. Said he saw Ryan around a few days earlier, standing on the sidewalk across from my place, just looking. Jerry thought maybe he was waiting for someone, but now he realized it was more than that. Said the guy gave him a bad vibe, but he figured it wasn't his business. By the end of the week, the cops called. Said they caught 3 men trying to rob a house across town. Same method, same masks. One of them was Ryan. He didn't resist. He gave up everything almost immediately once they started pressing. Turned out my place wasn't the first one. They'd done this a few times. Just picked people from the past, used the old connection to get inside, learn the layout, figure out what was worth taking. Ryan admitted to everything. Said he'd been in serious debt, owed people who weren't patient. When he ran into me by chance, he figured it was a sign. An easy job. A quiet house. Someone too new in the neighborhood to be cautious. That kid I played ball with all those summers ago had turned into a full-on criminal. It didn't feel real at first, but it was. And I had it on tape. During questioning, Ryan said he scoped out my house the minute I invited him over. Noticed the gadgets, asked leading questions, checked the rooms when I wasn't looking. Thought I had money, expensive gear, electronics he could flip quickly. That part stung more than I expected. Not just because I was nearly robbed, but because I was targeted by someone I had once trusted completely. I kept replaying that childhood in my head. The backyard games, the time we got caught climbing the school roof, how we used to race our bikes down the hill near his grandma's house. I thought we had something real back then. But maybe I was the only one who remembered it that way. He'd become something else over the years, and whatever version of Ryan I knew had disappeared long before we crossed paths again. I gave my statement to the detectives, turned over the camera footage officially, explained everything that happened from the grocery store to the night of the break-in. When the trial date came, I testified. It wasn't dramatic like you see in movies, just answered questions, pointed at screenshots, said what I knew. That was enough. He was sentenced to time, not a slap on the wrist either. After that, I tried to move on, but things had changed for good. The locks got upgraded. I installed 2 more cameras, one facing the backyard, one in the hallway. I stopped answering the door unless I knew who was on the other side. Sometimes even friends had to call first before showing up. I couldn't help it. The whole thing made me second-guess people in a way I never had before. For months after, any knock after sunset made me freeze. Even the delivery guys made me nervous. Eventually, I started talking more with the neighbors. We built a small network, shared numbers, created a group chat, kept each other informed. Someone saw a strange car. It went in the chat. Suspicious person walking too slow on the sidewalk? We all knew about it within minutes. My house felt like a small fortress now. Motion lights, reinforced doors, a full alarm system. Part of me hated it. hated the way it made me feel like a prisoner in my own place. But the other part knew it was necessary. Ryan had already stolen enough peace from me. I wasn't going to make it easy for the next guy. A few weeks later, police returned a couple of items they found in Ryan's car. Small stuff, a pair of wireless earbuds, a power bank, a camera lens I hadn't even realized was gone. He must have taken them on the first visit, when he was pretending to use the bathroom or just talking while I got drinks. That quiet theft made it all worse. He'd already decided to rob me before the masks ever came out. Some friends joke now that I'm the most paranoid guy on the block. And yeah, maybe I am. But they get it. They saw the cops outside my house that night. They saw the headlines when the case went public. They know what happened wasn't some silly prank gone wrong. It was planned, deliberate, and it could have gone much worse. My first April Fool's Day in the new place turned out to be something else entirely. Not a joke, not a prank, a real threat. One that cost me sleep, safety, and a piece of my past I used to value. Ryan and I were just kids once. But what started with a memory ended with court records and a sentence. Now, even when everything is calm, there's always that shadow in the back of my mind, reminding me that trust isn't something you give out freely. And sometimes, the people who seem most familiar are the ones who've already chosen to betray you. I live in a quiet suburb where all the backyards are split by low fences, and kids run from one house to another like it's one big playground. My job keeps me busy but not overwhelmed, so I have time to get into small projects around the house. A few weeks ago, I got the idea to build a tree house for the kids. Something simple, but strong enough to last a few years. My wife thought it was a good idea, said it'd be nice to get the kids outside more. I called up my old friend Ben to help out. We've known each other since high school, and we both like working with our hands. He's always up for projects like this, especially since his divorce last year. He's been kind of drifting, not much going on for him socially, so I figured it might be good for him too. The timing worked out. We started building just a few days before April Fool's Day. I even joked that it was a fake house for the kids, and they'd have to live in it now. Ben laughed, said he could rig up some fake plumbing too. We got to work pretty quickly. He came by almost every evening after work and spent full days over the weekend cutting, sanding, and fitting pieces together. He was more into it than I expected. Sometimes he stayed way after dark, even after I'd gone inside to shower and eat. I figured he just liked the peace and quiet, maybe enjoyed being around a family again. My wife mentioned once or twice that it was kind of odd how much time he was spending here, especially on nights when we weren't even working. One night, I came back outside after putting the kids to bed, and he was just sitting on the deck staring at the treehouse. I asked him if he was good, and he nodded, said he was just admiring the work. I didn't push it. He's been through a lot lately, and I thought maybe he just didn't want to go back to an empty apartment. The treehouse turned out really solid. We put in a small table, 2 benches, even a little shelf where the kids could keep their toys and books. They loved it. The neighborhood kids came over every day after school. There was laughter coming from that tree almost non-stop. It felt good to build something they enjoyed. I'd go up there sometimes just to sit and read or check that the boards were still sturdy. Ben, though, kept adding to it. He'd show up with more wood, more paint, more decorations, said he wanted it to look more polished. He spent hours putting in tiny touches, carved the kids' names into the sides, strung up solar-powered lights. It was nice, but it was starting to feel more like his project than mine. Still, I didn't complain. The kids were happy, and I figured he just needed the distraction. Then one morning, I noticed something strange. I was walking through the living room and realized a few things were missing. A photo frame with a picture from our wedding. A small clay handprint the twins made in preschool. A souvenir magnet from our trip to Oregon. I stood there looking at the shelf for a minute, trying to remember if we'd moved stuff around. I asked my wife later that day, and she said she hadn't touched anything. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe the kids had taken something up to the treehouse. Maybe my wife had done some spring cleaning and forgot to mention it. It wasn't until a few days later that something started to really feel off. I came home early from work one afternoon, around 3 p.m. The kids were still at school. My wife was at her office. The house should have been empty. But when I pulled into the driveway, Ben's car was parked out front. I assumed he was in the backyard working on the treehouse, so I didn't think much of it. But when I walked around the side of the house, the backyard was empty. The treehouse door was open, but no one was inside. I stood there for a moment, confused, then walked back around and into the house through the garage. The door from the garage into the kitchen was unlocked. I knew for sure we'd locked it that morning. I stepped in, and the first thing I saw was the cabinet under the sink wide open, cleaning supplies pulled out and sitting on the floor. I called out his name. No answer. I walked through the hallway and saw the door to the guest bedroom slightly ajar. When I pushed it open, the room looked untouched, but I noticed that the small drawer in the nightstand was open. Empty. It usually held some old chargers and a flashlight. Not valuable stuff. But still. I walked back out and found Ben standing in the hallway with a glass of water in his hand. He didn't look surprised to see me. Just said, "Oh hey, I thought I'd grab a drink and double-check the level on that last beam." I asked him why he was inside. He said he needed to make sure he had the right size drill bit and figured it'd be okay to come in since he knew where we kept the tools. I didn't say anything, just nodded. He walked past me and back outside like nothing happened. One evening when the kids were out at a sleepover, I decided to check the treehouse thoroughly. Something had been bothering me since that weird moment in the hallway. I climbed up just before sunset, flashlight in hand. Inside, I found something that stopped me cold. Our photo frames, the exact ones that had gone missing from the living room, were sitting on a shelf, neatly arranged. Next to them were small items from the house. My son's baseball cap, my old pocket notebook I hadn't seen in weeks, and a couple of random trinkets I couldn't even remember losing. It looked like a strange little shrine. The room wasn't messy. Everything was placed carefully, as if it were a real living room, but in miniature. It hit me then. This wasn't about decorating the treehouse for the kids. Ben had been moving parts of our home into this space like he was rebuilding it from scratch, piece by piece, under a different roof. I stood there for a few minutes, just staring at it all. I didn't touch anything. I backed out slowly, climbed down, and locked the treehouse from the outside. The next morning, I waited until he came by and confronted him. I asked him straight out what all the stuff was doing in the treehouse. He smiled at first like it was a joke, said he was trying to make it feel cozy and surprise the kids with a cool hangout spot on April Fools. But his eyes didn't match his voice. There was something twitchy in them, something restless. He kept glancing past me, toward the backyard. I asked him how he even got the items. Did he come in when we weren't home? He didn't answer that. Just mumbled something about how kids love familiar things. I told him to stop bringing anything else over. He nodded but didn't promise. After that, I kept a closer eye on him. Over the next week, I noticed he'd started sitting in the treehouse alone for hours at a time. No tools, no work. Just sitting in the corner, whispering. Once, from the kitchen window, I thought I heard him saying our last names out loud, repeating them slowly, like he was practicing. My wife told me she saw him taking one of our son's shirts from the laundry basket, claiming he wanted to help wash it, even though she'd just finished the laundry. We started locking all the doors during the day, even the backyard gate. We had a serious talk one night after the kids went to bed. She told me she was scared, not just uneasy, but scared of what he might do next. We agreed this had gone too far. I reached out to Ben's cousin, the only family contact I had. After a few awkward pauses, the cousin admitted that Ben had been in a bad state since the divorce. Not just depressed, obsessively looking for a new family. He said there'd been another case before, when Ben tried to insert himself into someone else's household. Tried to take over, as they put it, like he was filling a role that was never offered. We called a family friend who's a psychologist, explained everything. He didn't diagnose anything over the phone, but he made it very clear. We needed to limit Ben's access immediately. No visits, no treehouse, no more invitations. He said people in that mindset don't usually understand boundaries until something forces the issue. He warned that if we waited too long, something could happen that we couldn't undo. So we cut him off. I changed the locks on the garage and back door. We kept the kids inside for a few days, just to be sure. Ben noticed right away. He started texting at odd hours, asking why we were ignoring him, what he did wrong. Then came the messages saying we were betraying him, that he trusted us. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't know what to say. He started showing up uninvited. Sometimes he'd just sit in his car across the street staring. Other times he walked by slowly, pretending to check his phone but glancing at the house. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke up and found him standing in the backyard, just outside the treehouse, not moving. I called the police, but he was gone before they arrived. The last straw came a week later. It was a Saturday. The kids were playing a board game in the living room, and I was installing a new lock on the back door. Ben suddenly stormed into the yard, yelling loud enough that the whole block probably heard him. He kept shouting that we were liars, that this was his house now, that we had stolen his family. I stood in front of the kids, trying to keep calm, but ready to call 911 again. My wife did it before I even had to ask. When the authorities came, he didn't resist. Just kept talking, not shouting anymore, but whispering again. Saying our names, our kids' names. Saying everything was going fine until they changed the rules. His cousin and a couple mental health professionals arrived later that day and took him in for evaluation. We were told he wouldn't be coming back for a long while, if ever. After that, the house didn't feel the same. The treehouse felt poisoned. My wife and I made the decision a few weeks later. We listed the house, packed up the kids, moved to a different neighborhood, one with high fences and fewer neighbors. I don't think the kids fully understood why. We just said we wanted a fresh start. I still think about Ben sometimes. It's hard not to. He wasn't always like that. He used to be the guy I called when my car wouldn't start, or when I needed a second pair of hands. But somewhere along the line, he lost his way, and he tried to pull us into whatever he was sinking through. I don't hate him. I don't wish him harm. But I'll never let anyone get that close to my family again. Not even for something as innocent as building a treehouse. There's this comic book shop in a small mall not far from my rental apartment, and I used to go there a lot after work to just unwind. It wasn't anything fancy, kind of cluttered actually, with old posters peeling off the walls and dusty shelves crammed with back issues. But I liked it. I've always been into superheroes and sci-fi, and that place was like a little bubble where I could just zone out and flip through new releases. I'd lose track of time in there, standing between the narrow aisles, skimming covers and arguing with myself over whether to buy a limited edition or not. After a while, the owner started recognizing me. He was an older guy, always wore these vintage Star Trek tees and had thick glasses that kept sliding down his nose. One afternoon, I was leafing through a new series, and he introduced me to another regular named Dan. He said we had similar taste and should probably talk. Dan was already standing near the fantasy section, holding a couple of issues I'd just read the week before. We started talking, nothing big at first. He asked if I liked the latest reboot of a certain franchise, and I said yeah, but I wasn't sold on the art style. He agreed. It went like that. Easy conversation, low pressure. Turned out we liked a lot of the same series, hated the same lazy plot twists. It felt natural. For a couple of weeks, we'd run into each other by chance and end up chatting for half an hour, then an hour. Then the owner started joking that we should start our own podcast or something. As April Fool's Day got closer, we started swapping stories about dumb pranks we'd seen online or tried ourselves. Dan had a really good memory, could recall the smallest details. He'd say stuff like, "Remember that 2015 Batman prank where the guy pretended to rappel down the side of a building?" And yeah, I did remember it. He'd laugh a little too hard, maybe, but it didn't set off any alarms yet. Eventually, we exchanged numbers and moved the chat over to messages. He'd send links to obscure comic artists or some niche YouTube breakdowns. We even met up once outside the store, just grabbed coffee and browsed a flea market nearby. It felt good to have someone who got it, someone who didn't look at me weird for knowing the names of minor side characters or being annoyed about canon changes. What I noticed early on was that Dan really paid attention. Like, really paid attention. At first, I kind of liked it. It felt nice to have someone who actually noticed small things. He'd ask where I got my hair cut, and I'd laugh and give him the name of this small barbershop a few blocks from my place. He asked where I got this one graphic tee, a print of a lesser-known character from a 90s series, and I told him about a vendor on Etsy who does limited drops. Then, a couple weeks later, he showed up wearing the exact same tee. Same color, same size, same print. I thought it was funny at first. He said, "Man, you've got good taste," and we laughed about it. But then he showed up with a jacket that looked a lot like mine. Not similar, identical. Same brand, even the same scuff marks on the sleeves like he'd distressed it on purpose. I didn't say anything. It was weird, but I thought maybe it was just a coincidence. Over time, the little things added up. His hair started to grow out in a way that matched mine. I usually keep it a little long in the front, kind of messy, and one day I realized he was doing the exact same thing. Same part, same length. He even started talking about changing jobs, asking about what I did for work. I told him I was in graphic design, and a few days later, he mentioned applying for a junior design role at a firm close to mine. What really started to bug me was how he began showing up in places I used to go alone. There's a small cafe near my apartment where I like to get breakfast on Sundays, and I'd never seen him there before. Then, one morning, I walked in, and he was sitting at the back with a coffee and his phone. He acted surprised, but said, "Oh, you come here too?" I said yeah, and he asked if I wanted to sit. I made up something about having to take a call. Next week, same thing. He was already there. Then it happened again at a park I usually jog in, and later at a secondhand bookstore that I go to maybe once a month. The odds felt off. I started going at different times, taking slightly longer routes, switching up my schedule. And yet, he still managed to appear nearby, like he just happened to be in the area. When he asked about my apartment, I hesitated. He said he wanted to stop by and help with some computer problem I'd mentioned in passing, a lagging graphics driver, nothing major. I said it wasn't a big deal, that I'd figure it out. He pushed a bit, said he liked that kind of stuff, that he'd upgraded his own setup recently. I finally told him maybe on the weekend, and he nodded. But the next day, he texted again, saying, "I'll just swing by when it's convenient." No day, no time, just that. I asked when exactly, and he didn't answer, just left it on red. One day I came home from work earlier than usual. My boss had messed up the schedule, so I got off a couple hours ahead of time. As I walked up the stairs, everything felt normal. Quiet building, same hallway smell of old paint and takeout. But when I stepped into my apartment, something was off. The air felt different. Still. Wrong. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and noticed the balcony door was cracked open. That door is always locked. I'm careful with it because it doesn't shut tight unless you pull hard. I stood there for a second, just staring at it, trying to remember if maybe I'd left it like that. I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. I took off my jacket slowly and listened. There was a soft sound, something like fabric rustling or a drawer being pulled too hard. I moved down the short hallway toward the bedroom, keeping close to the wall. The noise got clearer. Someone was in there. I peered in, trying not to breathe too loud, and saw Dan. He was crouched in front of my dresser, pulling open the bottom drawer. That's where I kept personal stuff. Documents, small keepsakes, a couple of rare things I never left out in the open. He was rifling through it like he owned the place. I said his name, just loud enough to snap his head around. He froze. His face went completely pale. He didn't say a word. He just bolted. Pushed past the bed, knocked over a lamp, and sprinted right at me. I backed up, instinctively raised my arms, but he shoved me hard, almost knocked me into the wall. Before I could react, he was out the front door. I chased him down the stairs, yelling his name, but by the time I got outside, he was jumping into a car I didn't recognize. Some beat-up silver hatchback parked down the block. It peeled off before I could even get close. I didn't get the plate. Just stood there, breathing hard, watching it disappear around the corner. I went back inside, locked every door, and just stood in the middle of the living room, trying to make sense of what just happened. Once I calmed down a bit, I started going through my things. He didn't take a lot, just a small leather wallet with commemorative coins my grandfather gave me, and a couple of collectible figures from my childhood. The documents were all still there, but he'd clearly been looking through them. The drawers were half open, papers shuffled, one envelope even ripped open. He'd been trying to find something specific. I tried calling him, even though I knew it was useless. His number went straight to voicemail, then stopped ringing altogether. When I checked our message thread, his profile picture was gone. Then I opened his socials. Nothing. His Instagram was deleted, and his Discord username didn't exist anymore, like he'd scrubbed himself overnight. I sat there for a while, just going over the last few weeks in my head, trying to figure out what I missed. There were signs, a lot of them. I just ignored them. I thought he was just trying to be friendly, that we just had a weird amount of stuff in common. Now it was clear he'd been copying me deliberately. I didn't know why, but the break-in proved it wasn't harmless. The next day I went back to the comic shop, The owner was restocking some shelves, and I asked if we could talk. I told him what happened, everything. He looked surprised, kept shaking his head, saying he never really knew much about Dan. Said he came in maybe a month or two before I met him, paid in cash most of the time, didn't talk about himself. Just seemed like a chill guy who liked comics. He'd never given a last name. No one else at the store knew much either. It hit me then. Dan probably wasn't even his real name. He'd built this whole persona just to get close to people. Maybe not just me. Maybe he'd done this before. The whole thing, shared interests, mirrored style, casual hangouts, it was a setup, a way in. I ended up going to the police. I didn't think they'd take it seriously, but I had to try. I showed them the footage from the building's security camera. You could see him clearly walking through the main entrance, head down, hoodie on. They paused it and took screenshots, asked for everything I knew, texts, photos, social handles. But when they ran his phone number, it came back unregistered. No name tied to it. The address he gave me once, in an old chat, turned out to be a fenced-off warehouse. There was no trail, no ID, no known connections. The guy was a ghost. The detective I spoke to said he'd pass it along, but he didn't sound hopeful. I asked if there were similar reports, and he said there were a few cases of people using aliases to get close to victims for minor thefts, but nothing concrete that matched Dan's profile. I changed the locks the same week, bought new ones with reinforced bolts. I also stopped going to the places I'd mentioned to him. No more cafe visits, no more routine jogs. I kept my head down. I stopped sharing anything personal online and kept conversations with new people surface level. It wasn't paranoia, it was just damage control. I didn't want to go through anything like that again. April Fool's Day came and went that year, and I barely noticed. I didn't laugh at any pranks, didn't open any joke emails. The day just felt off, tainted. Like I'd spent so much time expecting harmless jokes that I never saw the real trick coming. I still think about it sometimes, not just the break-in or the stuff he took. What sticks with me most is how much he tried to become me. The way he dressed, talked, even how he styled his hair. It wasn't admiration, it was methodical. He'd built himself into a version of me. Why? I still don't know. Maybe he used my personality as a cover for something else. Maybe he was running some kind of scam and needed a believable identity. Or maybe it was just some twisted fixation. Whatever the reason, he vanished the second I caught him. Left no trace. And I'm left with this lingering thought. If I hadn't come home early that day, how far would he have gone? It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, I ended up tied up in the back of a van, somewhere in the middle of the woods, with my best man staring at me like a stranger. Our wedding was planned in this quiet countryside restaurant about an hour outside the city. My fiancé and I picked it because it felt private and cozy. No noise, no traffic, just trees and open space. Friends and family were already on their way that morning. Everything was ready. Food, music, decorations. We even got lucky with the weather. Clear skies, no wind. Jack, my best friend since college, was my best man. He's always been that guy. Wild ideas, constant jokes, never really grew out of the prank phase. He was already buzzing with excitement when he showed up 2 days before the wedding. Said he had one last bachelor surprise planned for me. The idea? A fake kidnapping. A kind of April Fool's stunt, except it was late March. But Jack insisted the timing made it even better. We'll grab you in the morning, make it look real, vanish for a few hours, then bring you back right before the ceremony. Everyone laughs, you get your cool story, bam. At first, I wasn't sure. But the way he pitched it made it sound light, funny. Like we'd record some dramatic footage, post it later, get a few laughs. I trusted him. I've known Jack more than a decade. He'd never do something actually dangerous. Plus, my fiancée was in on it too. She thought it was hilarious and even helped him pick the time. She told me, "Just act surprised. It'll be great for photos." That morning, Jack pulled up to the guest house in this sketchy-looking gray van. Not new, kind of dirty, no windows in the back. He leaned out the driver's side, grinning like a maniac. "Time to disappear, my guy." He waved me over, already filming on his phone. I had my suit hanging up in the guest house, so I just tossed on a hoodie and jeans, figuring I'd change later. I stepped inside the van and sat down on one of the crates in the back. Jack slid the door shut behind me, then got in the front and started the engine. We drove for about 20 minutes, leaving the paved roads and heading toward the edge of a forest area not far from the venue. I recognized the place. We'd hiked there years back, nothing but trees, trails, and a small creek running through. He was blasting some old punk music, occasionally turning around to film my captured face, telling me to look terrified. A few minutes later, he pulled the van off a dirt path and parked near a clearing. Then he came around the back, slid the door open, and tossed me a roll of duct tape. "Put your hands behind your back," he said, laughing. "We're going full method actor today." I laughed too, half joking. "You're taking this far, man." But I played along. I handed him my phone, told him not to lose it, then let him wrap the tape around my wrists, loose, but snug enough to look real on camera. I figured this was for the video. Then he pulled a black fabric sack from under one of the crates and slipped it over my head. It smelled musty, like it had been in a garage for years. Still, I didn't complain. At that point, it was still just Jack being Jack. He helped me out of the van and guided me by the shoulder. I stumbled a few times, couldn't see a thing, but I heard leaves and twigs cracking under our feet. We walked for a bit. I'd say maybe 10-15 minutes. We weren't on any trail, just weaving through trees, the ground uneven, roots catching under my shoes. I started sweating inside the hood. Then we stopped. I heard the sound of the wind through the trees and some birds. Nothing else. Jack yanked the hood off and I blinked hard. We were deep in the forest, not a single sign of the road or van, just trees in every direction. I turned to him and said, "All right, man, cool scene. Let's head back before people start panicking." He didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He stood there, staring at me. "I need to talk to you," he said. I frowned, glancing around. "Now?" "Yeah, now." He stepped closer, crossed his arms. "You remember 2 years ago? That trip to Miami?" I shook my head. "What?" "I heard what you said to Eric about what happened with that girl. You cheated on her." His voice was flat. Tight. I blinked at him. "Jack, I don't even know what you're talking about." He stepped forward and pushed my shoulder hard. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying," I said quickly. "I don't know what you think you heard." "You said it," he cut me off. "Eric told me. You laughed about it like it was nothing." I stood still, wrists still taped, feeling more confused than anything. Even if I said something, I never cheated. Not on her. Never. He didn't look convinced. His hands were shaking now. Not a lot, but enough for me to notice. Then he said, "You made a joke out of it. Like she didn't matter. Like people don't matter." "What are you talking about?" I asked again. Jack looked at me hard for a second, breathing fast. Then he grabbed my arm and yanked me down to sit on the ground. "I'm serious," he muttered. "You need to understand how this feels." I stayed still. My back was against a tree now. Cold bark digging into my shoulder blades. He pulled something from his jacket pocket. A small folding knife. He stopped the van in a spot so remote, I didn't hear a single sound outside except the engine cooling down. No birds, no wind, nothing. It felt like we were miles from the nearest road. Jack stepped out first, then opened the back and motioned for me to get out. When I hesitated, he grabbed my arm and pulled hard, like he'd snapped into some version of himself I didn't know. His eyes weren't wild or crazed. They were cold, focused. Like he'd made up his mind and nothing I said would matter anymore. He led me deeper into the trees, away from the van, until we reached a small clearing. There was a big fallen tree in the middle, half covered in moss. He pointed. "Sit." I tried to reason with him, still thinking maybe this was some twisted extension of the prank. "Jack, come on. People will start showing up at the venue. They'll panic when I don't come back." He didn't answer, just knelt down and tied my ankles together with rope he pulled from his backpack. The knots were tight. Not the kind of loose joke stuff from earlier. I could feel the circulation start to cut off almost immediately. "This is the joke," he said finally, standing over me. "Now you'll understand what it's like to be abandoned when it matters." "What are you talking about?" I asked again, but he was already turning away, walking back toward the van. I shouted after him, "Jack, don't walk away, man. Don't leave me out here." But he didn't even look back, just kept walking, slow and steady, like he was done with the conversation. I started yelling louder, hoping maybe someone, anyone, was nearby. But my voice just bounced off the trees and disappeared. I twisted my wrists, trying to find slack in the tape. Nothing gave. When I tried to move my legs, I toppled over onto the cold ground, landing against the side of the fallen log. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but after a while, the forest swallowed all the noise. I couldn't hear the van anymore. I couldn't hear anything. I tried getting the rope off my legs by grinding it against a jagged root sticking from the log, but it didn't work. The rope burned against my skin. My wrists were already starting to go numb. I shifted my weight, trying to drag myself across the leaves, but it was slow. Pathetic, really. I'd move a few inches, rest, then try again. The sun moved slowly across the sky above me. I watched the shadows stretch and then fade as the light dipped lower. It got cold faster than I expected. By late afternoon, my teeth were chattering. The hoodie I wore was thin, and the ground was still damp from rain earlier in the week. My fingers were stiff, hard to move. I didn't know how much time had passed, but I kept thinking about the ceremony. About everyone dressed up, looking around, confused. My fiancée waiting by the altar. My parents asking the staff if anyone had seen me. I thought about how Jack kept saying he wanted to teach me a lesson, that he believed I'd betrayed someone years ago, that he held on to it all this time. And this, leaving me tied up in the woods, this was his way of getting even. It didn't make sense. It felt insane. But Jack wasn't joking anymore. At some point, my head started spinning. I was shaking so bad my jaw hurt. I kept whispering to myself to stay awake, to keep moving. I rolled toward a patch of exposed roots and pressed the rope against them again. Harder this time. It scraped and bit into the fibers. It took what felt like hours, but finally, one of the loops loosened just enough that I slipped my foot out. But I couldn't stand. My legs were weak, shaky, numb. I crawled. That's all I could do. Crawl a few feet and collapse. Crawl again. I didn't know where I was going. I couldn't remember where the van was. Everything looked the same. Trees, leaves, dirt, sky going dark. Eventually, I just laid there, face down, unable to move. I couldn't feel my hands anymore. My thoughts got blurry. I remember the sky turning completely black, then a light, bright, white, shining in my face. When they found me, I couldn't speak. My lips were too cold to move. My throat was dry, cracked. I think I tried to say something, but it came out like a grunt. I saw blurry shapes, figures with flashlights, voices yelling, hands grabbing under my arms. They told me later that it was my sister's husband who organized the search. When I didn't show up, my fiancée called him first. She said Jack had joked about taking me into the woods, and when she hadn't heard anything for hours, she panicked. They called the police, but with no exact location, they didn't want to wait. He grabbed a few guys from the venue, brought flashlights, and started searching near every trailhead in the area. It was dark by the time they found me, curled up under that log, barely conscious. I spent 3 days in the hospital, early stages of hypothermia, some minor frostbite in my fingers. One doctor told me if they'd waited another hour, I might have lost parts of my hands, or worse. They postponed the wedding. Everything had to be rescheduled. My fiancée visited me every day in the hospital, but you could see the strain on her face. My parents were furious. Everyone was. And Jack? He didn't come forward right away. He went into hiding, apparently drove out of town and stayed with some cousin. But the police found him 2 weeks later. He tried to spin it like a joke gone wrong. Said he just pushed it too far. Said he thought someone would find me sooner. But no one believed that. Not after everything he did. The authorities charged him. Reckless endangerment, unlawful restraint, a few others I can't even remember. It's still going through the legal system. He might do time. And honestly, I hope he does. What messes me up the most is that I never saw it coming. I trusted him. I let him tie my hands. I got in that van like it was just a prank. I thought he was my friend. But that day, in the middle of what should have been the best moment of my life, he left me to freeze in the woods for something he never even told me he was angry about. And I still don't know what exactly he thought I did. All I know is, my wedding turned into a rescue mission. And my best man turned into someone I'll never trust again. It started getting weird when I woke up at 3 a.m. and heard my girlfriend whispering in the kitchen. At first, I thought she was on a late-night call with a friend, maybe Sarah, her best friend who she talked to a lot. But then I realized she'd been doing this more and more lately. Not just talking, but whispering like she didn't want anyone to hear. And I mean, we lived alone. Who was she hiding it from? Laura and I had been together for a few years, and things used to be normal. I worked a regular 9 to 5 at an insurance office. She stayed home most days, ran a small lifestyle blog, posted DIY stuff, recipes, typical influencer things. We had a quiet little life in a 2-story house we rented on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but we had a backyard, a small terrace, and we always joked about starting a garden we'd never really maintain. Things started to change about a year ago. At first, it was small. She began spending more and more time in front of her laptop, headphones on, typing like she was in some kind of rush. I'd come home, ask how her day was, and she'd mumble something like, "Oh, just working on the blog." But she always clicked her screen off when I walked by. Not just minimizing windows, she shut the whole thing down like she didn't want me to see anything. I brushed it off for a while, figured she was working on a surprise for our anniversary, or maybe a new business idea she didn't want to jinx by talking about. But then she started getting secretive in other ways too. She and Sarah would talk on the phone, and the second I entered the room, the call would end. Or she'd walk into the other room. At first, I gave her space. I didn't want to be that guy who gets paranoid over nothing. But over time, the tension in the house got thicker. You could feel it. Like something unspoken was taking up space between us. I asked her once, just casually, "Everything okay? You seem busy lately." She smiled, said she was just tired, but her eyes didn't match the smile. That was the first time I remember feeling something was truly off. Weeks passed, then months. Her routine shifted completely. She started going to bed later than me, saying she wasn't sleepy, wanted to read. I'd wake up sometimes and notice she wasn't in bed. I'd find her in the kitchen or the terrace, pacing or just sitting in the dark. Once I heard her say something like, "No, it's not safe. I told you that already." But when I asked who she was talking to, she said it was a podcast. Then the late-night calls became regular. I'd hear the low hum of her voice while I was half asleep. At first I thought I was imagining it, but after a while, I made sure to listen more carefully. One night, I got out of bed, walked silently down the stairs, and peeked into the kitchen. She was sitting with her back to me, phone pressed to her ear, whispering urgently. When the floor creaked under my foot, she spun around fast, hung up, and said she was just drinking water. I didn't confront her then. I should have, but I just nodded and went back upstairs. What made it worse was how careful she became with everything. Her phone was always face down, always locked. Her laptop, same thing, locked the second she walked away from it. I tried checking her browser history once when she forgot to close the lid, but every possible access point was password protected. Even her photo gallery needed a fingerprint. It wasn't like that before. Then there was the night she dropped her bag. It was late again. I came home after grabbing a late dinner with coworkers, and she was standing by the door, bag in hand, like she was about to leave. When she saw me, she flinched, dropped the bag by accident, and a few things spilled out. One of them was a small black box. It popped open when it hit the floor. Inside was a tiny pepper spray canister and a foldable knife, the kind that looks like a keychain but definitely wasn't decorative. I picked it up, confused. "Why do you have this?" I asked. She snatched it from my hand. "It's for self-defense," she snapped. "There's been break-ins around here." I didn't say anything right away, but that wasn't true. Our neighborhood was boring, if anything. We'd never even had a package stolen. I asked, "Since when are you carrying this?" She looked away and muttered, "Just in case." Then she stuffed everything back into the bag and went upstairs without another word. That night I stayed up, sitting in the living room, staring at the dark TV screen. I kept thinking about the knife, about the way her hands shook when she grabbed it from me. I remembered her pacing outside at night, the hushed phone calls, the sudden tension whenever I entered the room. Something wasn't right, and I didn't think it had anything to do with break-ins. A few days later, I tried to check her laptop again while she was in the shower. I waited until I heard the water running, then walked upstairs and opened it. Locked, of course. Even the guest login was disabled. I tried guessing a few passwords, our anniversary, her dog's name, basic stuff. Nothing worked. I heard the water shut off and closed it quickly, pretending I was just tidying up the bedroom. Then came the moment I couldn't ignore. I was brushing my teeth, and I heard her in the bathroom. She was still in the shower, but I could hear her talking. At first I thought she was singing or just thinking out loud, but then I caught a sentence. "You don't understand. It's not about him anymore." And then, "No, I told you, I can't leave now." I stood still, toothbrush in hand, trying not to make a sound. She was arguing with someone, but she was alone. After a few minutes, the water stopped. I quickly walked out and sat on the edge of the bed. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, she avoided looking at me. I didn't ask anything that night. I just pretended to be tired and went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up early and went straight downstairs to check the trash. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd find a receipt or something, some clue. Instead, I found the small black box again. This time, it was empty. A few days later, when Laura left to get groceries, I decided to go through her desk. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't take the guessing anymore. The top drawer had her notebooks and some receipts, nothing special. But in the second drawer, under a stack of old bills, I found a folder. Inside were printed articles. One was titled, "How to Protect Yourself from Threats." Another said, "What to Do If You're Being Blackmailed." There were also printed screenshots from online forums. Some of the threads were about self-defense laws. Others discussed unregistered weapons, where to get them, how to carry them. I stared at those pages for a long time. My mouth felt dry. I wasn't just imagining things. Something real was going on. I sat down and looked through everything again. Some articles were highlighted. Words like surveillance, extortion, and anonymous threats were circled in pen. I didn't recognize Laura's handwriting. That made it worse. I tried calling Sarah. I thought maybe she'd finally tell me what this was all about. She answered after a few rings, but the second I asked about Laura, she got cold. "This isn't your business," she said. "Just give her time." Then she hung up. My hands were shaking. I didn't know if this was about money, someone threatening her, or something darker. I kept thinking maybe she was in some kind of danger and didn't know how to ask for help. Or worse, maybe she was planning something for April Fools and it had spiraled out of control. That night, I confronted her again. I tried to stay calm, told her I needed to understand. She snapped. "You don't get it," she yelled. "Everything I'm doing is to protect us." She looked like she was about to cry, but didn't. "You think this is a game? You think this is just some blog project or prank?" I asked what she meant by protect. From what? Who? She didn't answer. She just stormed into the bathroom and slammed the door. I didn't follow. I couldn't make sense of anything anymore. Soon, the neighbors started to notice. An older couple from next door asked me one morning if everything was okay. "We've seen your lights on all night. We just wanted to check in," they said. I lied and said Laura was working on a deadline. But the truth was, she barely slept. Some nights I'd find her just sitting in the living room with her laptop, staring at the screen. She stopped going to the weekly get-togethers on our street. She avoided eye contact with everyone. Even her posture changed, always tense, like she was bracing for something. One evening, just before dinner, there was a knock on our door. I opened it to find two men standing there, maybe in their 30s, dressed clean but not friendly. One of them asked, "Does Sarah live here?" I told them no. He looked over my shoulder into the house and then said, "We were told she might be staying here. It's important." Before I could answer, Laura appeared beside me, calm but firm. "She's not here. You should leave." Her tone was sharp. The men looked at each other, then turned and left without another word. Laura didn't say anything. She grabbed her keys and walked out. No explanation, no jacket, just left. I waited for hours. She came back just after 5 a.m., looking exhausted. Her hair was messy, her shoes muddy. I asked where she'd gone. She didn't even look at me. "I need sleep," she said, and went upstairs. That morning, I called her sister. I didn't know what else to do. She paused for a long time after I told her everything, then said, "Laura's going through something complicated. It's better if you don't interfere right now." That was all she gave me. Nothing about what was happening or what I could do to help. Just don't interfere. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept listening for noises, kept thinking about those men, about Sarah, about Laura's behavior. My own home didn't feel like mine anymore. I started locking our bedroom door at night. Then came the breaking point. It was around 2 in the morning. I heard a faint shuffle near the front door. I got out of bed slowly and walked into the hallway. From the stairs, I could see Laura by the entrance, wearing her coat, holding a backpack. She was moving quietly, like she didn't want to wake me. She froze when she saw me. I didn't say anything. Just stood there. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. Her voice was flat. "Don't ask where I'm going. It's safer for you if you don't know." She didn't wait for a response. She opened the door and stepped out into the dark. The door closed softly behind her. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, not moving. My brain couldn't process what had just happened. Eventually, I called her sister again. This time I didn't bother with small talk. I just said, "Laura's gone. She left with a bag." What's going on?" Her voice was calmer than I expected. "She filed a police report last week," she said. "Some people were following her. Sarah got involved in a mess, debt stuff, dangerous people. They started threatening Laura, too." I sat down on the stairs. "She didn't tell you," her sister continued, "because she thought it would put you in danger. She didn't want you dragged into it." There was a long silence. I asked where she went. "She just said, she's okay. She's getting help." Days passed. I didn't hear from Laura. I found a letter on her desk, unsigned. It didn't explain much, just said she was sorry for how things had played out, that she loved me, that she hoped I'd understand one day. I never saw her again after that. All the weird behavior, the secrets, the phone calls, it all made sense, but way too late. She was trying to protect herself from something real, and in doing so, she shut me out completely. Maybe she thought it was the only way. Now the house feels empty, quiet in a way that makes my skin crawl. I keep thinking I'll hear the door open again, but it never does. The moment I felt the blade cut into the back of my neck, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't like a shaving accident or a quick slip. It was sharp, deep, and deliberate. I tensed up immediately, and before I could say anything, he muttered, Sorry, clumsy hands today," like it was just a little mishap. But I could feel the warm trickle sliding down my skin, and it didn't stop. I met Luke back in college. We were roommates during our first 2 years. He was always the cooler one between us. Into fashion, sneakers, tattoos, the whole look. He knew how to talk to people, made friends easily, always had plans. I was quieter, more of the desk and coffee kind of guy. After graduation, we went separate ways. I ended up in a corporate job, basic 9-to-5 stuff. He went all in on his dream and opened a barbershop in one of those gentrified neighborhoods where everything's got that industrial chic vibe. Bare brick walls, Edison bulbs, overpriced coffee next door. We kept in touch. Not daily, but we'd text, meet up once in a while. The first year his shop seemed to do well. He posted Instagram stories of clients, had some collaborations with local brands. But after a while, he started complaining. First, it was just stuff like slow day or had a couple no-shows. Then it turned into longer rants. I swear they just go to those TikTok famous barbers now. They don't care about skill. I listened, gave the usual, "hang in there, man," or maybe do a promo post or something. But looking back, maybe my tone came off more sarcastic than I realized. Maybe he took it that way. Anyway, a week before April 1st, he texted me, "Yo, swing by the shop next weekend. Free cut for my day one, bro. Gonna try a new style I've been working on." I figured, sure. I hadn't had a cut in a while, and honestly, I wanted to show some support. Maybe if the style looked cool, I'd post it, tag him, help get him some eyes on the shop. I didn't think too hard about it. The shop was quiet when I arrived. Saturday, late afternoon. The 2 chairs near the window were empty. One of his barbers, a younger guy with a buzz cut and sleeve tattoos, was wiping down his station, packing his clippers into a drawer like he was done for the day. He gave me a brief nod, didn't smile, just kept working. There were a few stray hairs on the floor, but overall, the place was clean, smelled like aftershave and floor polish. Luke came out from the back, wearing his usual apron, hair slicked back. He grinned, clapped me on the shoulder. "Glad you came, man. You're gonna love this one." He pointed to the main chair. "Sit down, relax. This is gonna be next level." He wrapped the paper collar around my neck, laid a cape over my shoulders. All routine. The chair squeaked slightly when he adjusted the height. He sprayed my hair with water, combed through it, and started chatting like we were back in the dorm. "Remember that time you got locked out in just your boxers?" I laughed, because yeah, that was funny. Normal banter. Normal. Then he said, "I've been working on this new technique. Bit experimental, but I think it's got potential. Gonna use the texturizing shears more on the lower layers." I didn't think much of it. I figured he wanted to impress, maybe try something edgy to post online. He started with the back. I couldn't see what he was doing, but it felt like a regular cut. Scissors snipping, comb moving through. Then I felt the jab, not like a nick or a scratch. The metal hit my skin, hard. It bit in. I flinched and let out a quick, "Ow! What the hell?" Luke paused for maybe half a second. "My bad, bro. Just slipped a little. Hold on, I'll clean it up." I reached up instinctively, but he gently pushed my hand down. "Don't touch it. You'll smear it. Let me fix it." He grabbed a towel and dabbed the area. The pressure hurt. I felt something wet run down under the collar. I said, "Am I bleeding?" He didn't answer right away. He grabbed a cotton pad, something from a small bottle. The scent was sharp, alcohol or antiseptic. He pressed again. I could hear the wet sound of fabric against skin. "You're good. Just a scratch. Happens sometimes with these scissors. They're sharper than usual." I stayed still, but my fingers gripped the armrests. Something was off. His hands weren't shaking. His voice was calm. Too calm. I wasn't sure if he was pretending or if this was really just a weird accident. But I could feel the liquid soaking into the back of the collar, dripping slowly. He moved behind me again and the scissors came close to my ear. The metallic sound was back, clicking softly. "Let's just finish up. I'll blend it out, and no one will even notice." He came back with a folded towel and pressed it to my neck, whispering something under his breath. I couldn't make out the words at first. It sounded like he was trying to calm me down, saying things like, "It's okay. Stay with me." But his voice was shaky. I tried to answer, but my mouth felt thick. My arms were heavy, and when I tried to lift them, they barely moved. My legs, too. They were losing strength like someone flipped a switch. I thought maybe I was just freaking out from the sight of blood. But it didn't feel like panic. It felt like my body was shutting down. He kept wiping the back of my neck, the pressure getting harder. His hands moved fast, like he was trying to erase something. I could hear his breath speeding up. He still hadn't called anyone. No ambulance, no emergency line. Just him muttering, wiping, glancing at the back door of the shop like he was deciding something. I finally managed to mumble, "Why aren't you calling someone?" He stopped for a second, looked me in the eyes through the mirror. "I can't. I don't want trouble, man. I'll drive you. It's faster anyway." It wasn't. I knew that wasn't true. Every minute felt longer than the last. The warmth on my neck kept spreading, and the towel was soaked now. The dizziness was growing, and I started to realize that maybe the cut had hit more than just skin. Maybe it got a nerve or something deeper. My fingers weren't responding right. I tried to grip the armrest again. Nothing. His eyes were darting everywhere. His face looked pale, sweating, like he was more scared than me. And yet, he still wasn't moving fast. He finally took off the cape, bundled it up, threw it in the back, then helped me up. I could barely stand. My legs folded a bit, but he caught me under the arm and dragged me toward the door. The fresh air outside hit me like a wave, but it didn't clear my head. If anything, I felt heavier. We made it to his car, a gray Honda that smelled like old fast food and leather cleaner. He opened the passenger side and helped me in. My head slumped against the seat, and I tried to keep my eyes open. The streetlights blurred as we pulled out of the lot. The roads were mostly empty. It was late now. But even then, he stopped at every red light. Just sat there. I turned my head with effort and saw his hands shaking on the steering wheel. "You need to hurry," I said. Or at least I think I did. It came out slurred. He didn't answer. His eyes kept flicking between the road and the dashboard, like he was thinking about something else, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. The seconds dragged at every stoplight, even though no other cars were around. It was like he was stalling. We finally pulled into the hospital parking lot. He parked, jumped out, and ran to my side. Helped me out slowly, trying to make it look normal. But by then, I couldn't walk. I collapsed halfway to the door, and someone from inside spotted us and ran over. Doctors swarmed me the second I hit the floor. Questions were flying. What happened? How long ago? What kind of injury? I couldn't talk. My body wasn't listening. Luke told them it was a weird accident during a haircut. That was all. Then, while they were checking my vitals and wheeling me inside, he backed off. I saw his face one last time as the elevator doors closed. He turned and walked out without saying another word. The surgery took hours. They told me later that the cut had damaged a bundle of nerves near the base of the neck. Not something that usually happens with scissors. Not unless you go in deep, at the exact wrong spot. The doctors did what they could, but they warned me recovery would be slow, maybe incomplete. They were right. When I woke up the next day, I couldn't move my legs. My arms worked, barely. Numb fingers, slow grip. The words partial paralysis kept getting repeated. I asked about Luke. No one had seen him again. He left his info at the front desk, but the number he gave didn't work. After a week, I was discharged into outpatient rehab. My apartment had to be modified. I couldn't take the stairs, couldn't cook properly, couldn't even shower alone. My company put me on medical leave. My friends visited at first, brought groceries, tried to cheer me up. But after a few weeks, the visits dropped off. No one wants to hang around someone who can't leave the couch. I tried to call Luke. His number was dead. Texts bounced. I checked his social media. Gone, deleted or deactivated. I walked myself through what had happened again and again. Maybe it really had been an accident. Maybe he just panicked. But that didn't explain how deliberate everything felt. The delay. The silence. The way he didn't even try to help beyond the bare minimum. Then I heard through an old college friend that Luke's shop had closed down the following week. He'd been months behind on rent. The landlord had come in one morning and found the place emptied out. Luke gone. Equipment gone. Just the stained cape left behind. That same friend told me something else. Apparently, Luke used to vent about me more than I knew. Said I talked down to him, made jokes about his little barber dream, gave advice like I was better than him. I never meant it that way, but I guess he saw it differently. It hit me that the scissor wound might not have been an accident, not just clumsy hands. He knew what he was doing with tools. He practiced every day. A slip that precise? Right on the nerve? There was no way to prove intent. No camera footage, no witnesses, no confession. Just my word against silence. But every time I looked in the mirror, saw the scar on my neck, or struggled to lift a glass of water, it didn't feel like an accident. Now, even April Fool's Day feels sick to me. People laughing, pulling dumb pranks. I scroll past all of it. My body still doesn't work right. Rehab is slow, frustrating. And the guy I once called my closest friend might have destroyed my life just to make a point. It all started to seem off the night I heard him yelling into the phone, threatening someone that if things fell through, they'd pay for it, big time. The voice didn't sound like the Brian I knew, or thought I knew. But maybe I should back up a bit. Earlier that month, I was in a rough place. Lost my job, couldn't afford my rent, and felt like I was slipping into a dark pit. I knew I had to change something before it got worse. I saw this ad online from a charity organization looking for volunteers. It mentioned helping with admin tasks, organizing drives, working on projects for schools and shelters. It sounded like exactly the kind of thing I needed to feel useful again. I met the guy running it, Brian, in a small office not far from the city center. First impression? Guy was magnetic. Smiling, confident, dressed sharp but not flashy. He had a way of talking that made you feel like you were part of something big. He told me about all the projects they had going, school renovations, food for low-income families, even outreach for stray animals. He said they were always looking for people who actually cared. I told him about my background in admin work, and he immediately said I'd be a good fit. A few days later, after I started helping out, he invited me to stay in a small guest house on his property. Said it was easier for volunteers to be nearby, and that since I didn't have stable housing at the moment, it just made sense. I was hesitant at first, but everything felt legit. I'd seen his credentials, met some of the other people helping out, and the place was clean and quiet. It felt like maybe April was going to be my fresh start. The first few days were almost too perfect. He cooked dinners, introduced me to his friends, even let me sit in on planning meetings. He kept saying I had potential. I guess I looked up to him. I wanted to believe people like him still existed, selfless, driven, generous. He gave speeches about impact and legacy, talked about how we were changing lives. He had a whiteboard in his office with all these figures and project timelines. Everything looked professional. There were a few times he got irritated, snapped at someone on the phone, slammed his laptop shut when things didn't work right. But I figured that was just pressure. He had a lot on his plate. But after about 2 weeks, I noticed something weird. Anytime we received donations, whether it was cash or through bank transfers, he was the only one who touched the money. He'd make a quick note on a spreadsheet, but never let me or anyone else see the full financials. I brought it up casually once, asked if he wanted me to help track the donations. He brushed it off with a smile and said, "Nah, I've got a system." But the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The next time I brought it up, he got tense. Not angry, just sharp. Asked why I was so interested. I backed off and said I was just trying to be helpful. He said, "Don't worry, everything's accounted for. This isn't some scam." That last line stuck with me, mostly because I hadn't accused him of anything. Then came the phone call. It was around 9:30 p.m. I'd just gotten out of the shower, towel around my shoulders, heading to my room. His office door was open a crack, and I could hear him pacing and shouting into the phone. His voice was loud and tight, like he was cornered. "If this falls through, you're done. I don't care who you know, you'll pay for it." I froze. He slammed the door shut a second later, and I rushed quietly to my room. He didn't mention it the next day, but I asked if everything was okay. He said some partners had tried to back out of a donation agreement and were jeopardizing a big campaign. Said it was nothing new in this line of work. I nodded like I believed him, but I started paying more attention after that. A few days later, I realized he knew more about my daily schedule than he should. One time I came home from a walk and he said, "Back from the park already?" I hadn't told him I went to the park. Another time, I slept in on a Sunday and he knocked on my door right after 10 a.m. saying, "You usually wake up by 9. Everything okay?" It was subtle, but constant. He'd pop into my room without warning, sometimes just to say hi, sometimes to remind me about a task. But he never knocked. I started keeping my door locked when I was inside. He didn't like that. One afternoon he tried the handle, found it locked, and said from the hallway, You don't need to lock yourself in. This is your home now. I didn't answer. When I asked about taking the weekend off to visit my brother, he got visibly annoyed. Said this was the busiest season for donations, and we were behind on a few deadlines. I told him it was just 2 days. I'd be back by Monday. He shook his head. Right now, every hour counts. Can you imagine if the others took time off too? I dropped it. But I didn't stop thinking about how he always found a reason to keep me close. The last straw in that stretch was when I found him in my room one evening. I'd just stepped out to grab groceries and came back earlier than expected. I walked in and he was standing by my desk, looking at a notebook I'd left open. He didn't even flinch. Just said, "Was looking for the printer paper. Thought you might have it in here." Then he walked past me like nothing had happened. The day before April 1st, we were getting ready for a big fundraising event downtown. The whole idea was to ride the wave of the holiday vibe. People in this city love any excuse to dress up, laugh, and spend money. Brian wanted to use that energy to draw attention to the foundation. He'd planned street booths, banners, costumes, giveaways, the works. It sounded fun on paper, but the morning of, it was clear he was on edge. From the second we arrived at the office, he was already shouting. First at the volunteers, demanding they hang up decorations faster, move tables, carry gear 2 blocks over. Nothing was fast enough for him. Then it was me. He walked over holding the promotional flyers I'd printed the day before and just started tearing into me. "This is garbage," he snapped. "You think anyone wants to read a wall of boring text? You ruined the whole thing." I told him calmly that he'd approved that exact layout just yesterday. He stared at me, like trying to decide whether to argue or ignore me. "That's not the point," he said finally. "It's your job to make it better. Fix it." Then he started barking more orders at the others before finally slamming the stack of flyers down and locking himself in his office. It wasn't just stress. It felt like something deeper was eating at him. Like the entire event wasn't really about raising money, but holding something together that was about to fall apart. By mid-afternoon, he'd pushed everyone too hard. A few of the volunteers left early, saying they didn't feel well. The rest stayed quiet, doing whatever they were told. I stayed too, not because I was okay with it, but because I wanted to understand what was really going on. Around 5 p.m., he kicked me out of the planning room completely. "I'll handle it," he said, slamming the door. "Just stop getting in the way." I stood outside the room for a second, listening to him pacing and muttering to himself. I didn't hear words, just tone. Fast, tense, panicked. I went back to my room and sat on the bed, staring at the floor. His perfect image was cracking, and fast. The next morning, the whole plan started falling apart. A shipment of materials we needed, branded t-shirts, balloons, leaflets, got delayed due to a logistics mix-up. We weren't told until the delivery window passed. When Brian found out, he lost it. Not just yelling, but throwing stuff. He called the supplier, cursed at them, slammed the phone down, and stormed into his office. I waited a few minutes, then followed him in. I figured maybe I could calm him down or offer a quick workaround. We still had some spare materials from last month's event. But the second I opened the door, I could feel the air change. He looked up from his desk, eyes red, jaw clenched, papers scattered everywhere. "What?" he snapped. I stepped forward, holding one of the older flyers. "We could reuse some of these, at least for the backup tables. It's not ideal, but..." He didn't let me finish. He jumped up, stormed around the desk, grabbed the flyer from my hand, crumpled it, and shoved me hard. "You think I want people seeing this crap?" he shouted, his face inches from mine. I stumbled back, raising my hands. "Brian, I'm just trying to help." That's when he grabbed me by the front of my shirt and slammed me into the wall. His fist came up fast, hit me in the cheek, just below the eye. I didn't fall, but my legs wobbled. "You're ruining this," he screamed. "You screw up everything, and then act like it's not your fault?" I pushed him back, my hands shaking. "You need to stop." His eyes narrowed. "If you tell anyone about this, no one will believe you. I'm the one who helps people. You? You're nothing." I didn't answer. I just got out of the room as fast as I could. I walked out the front door without grabbing anything and kept going down the street. I wasn't even sure where I was headed. I just knew I couldn't stay there another second. After about 20 minutes, I stopped at a gas station, used the bathroom mirror to check the bruise forming on my face, and called the police. They arrived in under an hour. I explained what happened, kept it simple, just the facts. They asked a few questions, then went to the house. Brian was still there, clearly shaken when they knocked. I didn't hear everything they said, but within minutes, they had him in cuffs and walked him out to the car. I gave a full statement at the station. The officer told me quietly that mine wasn't the first report they'd gotten about him. There were whispers of misused funds, irregularities in his tax filings, and other complaints that had never gone public. My assault report finally gave them cause to dig deeper. It didn't take long for the cracks to widen. Over the next few weeks, media outlets picked up the story. More former volunteers came forward. Some spoke about verbal abuse. Others hinted at forged documents and fake donation reports. The golden image Brian had built over the years was gone almost overnight. He was indicted for fraud, and the foundation was shut down. I stayed with a friend on the other side of town, slowly piecing my life back together. The bruise faded in a few days, but I still flinched every time someone raised their voice around me. I started looking for work again, this time with companies I could properly vet. I didn't want another Brian. Looking back, the scariest thing isn't what happened. It's how long I ignored the signs. He seemed kind. He had charm, respect, influence. But behind the smile was something dangerous, and I learned the hard way that good intentions can be the perfect mask for control. I don't trust easy anymore, but I do listen. To instincts, to patterns, to the little red flags that don't make sense at first. Because once you've seen someone go from hero to predator up close, you don't forget it. Since I was a kid, I always loved cooking. My grandma used to keep all her recipes in this old notebook with a red leather cover, pages full of her handwriting, smudges of dough, and old oil stains. When I got older, I started copying them down into my own thick spiral notebook, page by page. I didn't know what I'd do with them back then, but I liked the idea of keeping them safe. By the time I hit my mid-20s, I finally figured out what I wanted to do: share those recipes online. I didn't care about going viral or anything like that. I just wanted to record the stories behind the food. So I started a cooking channel. It was small at first, but people liked the homely vibe. Nothing flashy, just honest cooking with a bit of background about where each recipe came from. A lot of the recipes had family stories, like the apple cinnamon pie that my grandma used to bake every New Year's Day. My friend Laura was around a lot during that time. We'd known each other since school, and she always seemed genuinely curious about what I was doing with the channel. She wasn't super into cooking, but she liked the content creation side of it. Lights, camera angles, editing tricks. I appreciated the help, and when she suggested doing a special April Fool's Day cooking challenge, I thought it sounded fun. We'd film silly recipes, some edible, some weird on purpose. I invited her into a few videos as a guest. We laughed a lot while filming, throwing flour around, messing up intentionally, reacting big for the camera. She brought some ideas of her own. Some were decent, some a little too offbeat, but it didn't matter. The audience liked our chemistry. The April Fool's theme gave us a spike in views, and I was glad she got some recognition too. It felt fair. After a few of those joint videos did well, she brought up an idea. Why not start uploading similar videos to her own page as well? She said it could help spread the brand and give people 2 channels to follow. I hesitated for a second, but then agreed. It made some sense. Plus, she was my friend. I didn't want to come off as controlling or selfish. But it didn't stay even for long. She started pushing her own uploads more than our collab videos. At first, it was just behind-the-scenes clips, bloopers, stuff we didn't use. Then she uploaded a video making this weird rainbow spaghetti recipe we had done as a joke and framed it like she came up with it herself. No mention of the original video or my channel. Still, I didn't say anything. Maybe she just forgot. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. A couple of weeks later, she asked if I could share some of my family recipes with her. Just a few for inspiration, she said. I didn't give her the full notebook, obviously, but I did email her a couple. One for honey oat bread and another for my grandma's apple cinnamon pie. I even said, "This one's really special to me. It's been in the family forever." She replied with a smile emoji and said, "Of course, I'll credit you if I use anything." About a month went by before I started getting DMs from subscribers. Most were polite, just confused. "Hey, didn't you already post this pie recipe last year?" Or, "I saw someone named Laura post the exact same cake. Are you two still collaborating?" I checked Laura's channel, and, sure enough, she'd uploaded 3 different videos. One for the honey oat bread, one for the spaghetti, and another titled, "My Favorite Family Pie Recipe, Apple and Cinnamon from Scratch." I watched the pie video all the way through. She used the same ingredients, same technique. Even the way she sprinkled the sugar on top before baking, exactly like my grandma taught me. And then I saw it in the pinned comment under her video. "This is my personal recipe, passed down through my family." I froze. I didn't want to make a scene. I thought, okay, maybe she got confused or forgot. So I texted her and asked if we could meet for coffee. We met at our usual spot, this little bakery with outdoor seating. I brought up the video and just said, "Hey, I noticed you posted the pie recipe. That one was from my grandma, remember? I thought you were going to credit it." She laughed, not nervous at all. "Oh, come on, it's just pie. People make versions of the same thing all the time. Besides, we're kind of doing this as a team, right? What's yours is mine." She shrugged like it was no big deal, took a sip of her latte. "Viewers don't care about that stuff. It's all just entertainment." I didn't argue. I just said okay and left it there. But later that night, I went through more of her videos. I started seeing a pattern, not just the apple pie. She had uploaded my grandma's carrot cake too, even copied the way I cut it into neat squares and wrapped it in wax paper. Her captions all said, "Original recipe." There were dozens of comments complimenting her creativity, asking for more family stories. I kept scrolling, past the video titles, past the comments. Every time someone asked if she came up with it herself, she answered, "Yes, this one's all mine." I sat there, staring at her channel banner, wondering how many of my recipes she had posted without telling me. When I asked Laura to stop posting my signature recipes without checking with me first, she changed completely. Her face stiffened, and she looked at me like I was the one causing trouble. Then she said, flat out, "You should be asking me for permission, not the other way around." I stared at her, trying to understand what she meant. I thought maybe I misheard. I asked her to explain. I told her calmly that these recipes were from my grandma, that I'd trusted her with them. But she cut me off, said I was delusional, that none of it was original. "You think you're some kind of genius chef?" she snapped. "Everything you post is already on the internet. You're just copying what other people do." I was stunned. I knew it wasn't true, and she knew it too. These were family dishes, passed down for years. But she kept going, accusing me of using her for content, saying she built my audience for me. After that conversation, she stopped showing up to our group meetups. When other friends asked what was going on, I just said we were taking a break from working together. I didn't want to start drama, especially not online. But in private, Laura kept messaging me. The tone got nasty. She accused me of being jealous, of riding on her coattails. She said I was bitter because her solo videos were doing better than mine. I tried not to respond, just blocked her on one platform, but she popped up on others. The weirdest part was how quickly she flipped. Just a few weeks ago, we were baking side by side, laughing at dumb jokes. Now she was acting like I was her enemy. I wanted to shut everything down, just delete my channel and be done with it. But then, I'd get messages from longtime subscribers asking for a new recipe, saying they missed my uploads. Some people noticed Laura's versions were just copies and were calling her out for it. That helped a little. It reminded me why I started the channel in the first place. Then came the night before April 1st. We had been planning a live stream together for weeks before the fallout started. I figured we'd cancel it, but out of the blue, Laura messaged me and said she wanted to go through with it. She acted like nothing had happened. Said we could do one last joint stream for the fans. She even suggested that I make my signature pasta dish with creamy garlic sauce, one that people kept requesting. The only issue, I'm mildly intolerant to one of the traditional ingredients in the sauce, so I always used a dairy-free substitute. She knew that. She said, "Don't worry, I'll prep everything. You just focus on hosting the stream." I wasn't sure about it. Part of me thought she was trying to make peace in public. I agreed, but only because I wanted to show the audience that I wasn't involved in any drama. I figured I'd keep everything professional, keep it light, get through it. We went live the next evening. At first, it was normal. We joked around, answered questions in the chat, and started cooking. She handed me the prepped ingredients for the sauce while I was still replying to a comment. I didn't double-check what she gave me. Everything looked fine. The cream was already measured out in a small glass cup. She stood next to me, smiling, as I poured it into the pan and stirred. About 5 minutes in, I started feeling tightness in my throat. It crept in slowly, then all at once. My lips felt numb. My fingers went tingly. I tried to stay calm. Thought maybe I was imagining it, but the pressure in my chest kept growing. My eyes watered, and I reached for the edge of the counter to steady myself. People in the chat started noticing. Comments popped up fast. "Are you okay? You look pale. What's happening?" I turned to Laura. She was still smiling at the camera, waving at the viewers like everything was fine. She didn't even glance at me. My vision blurred for a second, and I leaned off camera, trying to breathe deeper. That's when I knew. I had been dosed with something. Probably full dairy cream. My body was reacting fast. I dragged myself out of frame and stumbled into the hallway. Luckily, I always kept emergency allergy meds in a drawer near the kitchen, just in case. I grabbed the injector and jammed it into my thigh. It burned like hell, but within a minute, my breathing started to settle. Not back to normal, but enough that I could speak again. I heard my phone buzzing like crazy in the other room. Viewers had called emergency services. Someone must have recognized the signs of anaphylaxis. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, waiting for the ambulance. In the kitchen, I could still hear Laura talking to the stream. I don't know what she said after I left the camera. Maybe she kept pretending it was a prank. The paramedics arrived in under 10 minutes. They checked my vitals and gave me another dose of antihistamines. They said I should go to the hospital, just to be safe. While they were packing up, 2 officers arrived. Turns out, someone watching the stream had reported what happened. When I told them Laura had prepped the food knowing I couldn't eat dairy, and that she hadn't warned me, They took her aside to ask questions. She tried to act confused at first. Said I must have grabbed the wrong ingredient. But she couldn't explain the look she gave me right before I started cooking. The way she stared at me, like she was waiting for something. And someone in the chat had clipped that moment, sent it in with their report. That was enough for the police to take her in for questioning. They found the rest of the cream in her bag, labeled plain dairy. She hadn't even tried to hide it. My channel took a hit after the incident. News spread fast. Some people accused me of staging the whole thing for views. Others defended me. I ended up hiding most of my content and stepping away from uploads. The investigation is still ongoing, but what Laura told the police after, what she admitted, was what shook me the most. She said she just wanted to prove that I didn't know what I was doing, that I was so fake I wouldn't even notice if something was wrong in my own kitchen. She thought that would embarrass me, maybe push me offline. But she didn't expect me to end up in the hospital. Now, I don't know if I'll ever go back to filming. Every time I walk into the kitchen, I double-check everything. I lock the door. I don't tell people when I'm going live. I never imagined I'd feel unsafe in my own home because of someone I used to call a friend. When I was getting married, the bachelorette party was supposed to be just a fun night to relax before the chaos of the wedding. We booked a few hotel rooms, invited a bunch of friends, and everything looked pretty normal. One of the girls, Natalie, was already known for being wild though. She had a habit of drinking too much and making scenes, but everyone still invited her because she could be fun in short bursts. I had this small worry she'd go too far, but I figured the worst case would be loud singing, or maybe an awkward flirtation or two. Nothing we couldn't handle. The evening started okay. We had music, drinks, those cheesy party decorations with plastic tiaras and feather boas. Around 10 or 11, Natalie started slipping. First, she made a jealous comment about one of the other girls talking to some guy. Then came a weird little argument about someone always stealing attention. It was annoying, but familiar. A few of us tried to calm her down. She cried a bit. Then she disappeared into the bathroom for 20 minutes. When she came out, her makeup was a mess, and she smelled like stronger liquor than we'd been drinking. She wasn't aggressive exactly, just sloppy. She knocked over a glass, made another scene about someone not appreciating her friendship, then dramatically declared she was staying out until sunrise. We tried to convince her to leave with us, offered to get her an Uber, but she waved us off and ordered another drink. I remember she said, "This night's not over until I say it is." A few of the girls laughed uncomfortably. I just felt tired. It was my night. I wasn't in the mood to babysit a drunk adult who didn't want help. My focus was on getting everyone else home safe. A couple of us checked in with her one last time before we left, but she just kept scrolling on her phone, sitting at the bar like nothing mattered. That was the last time I saw her. After that night, I didn't really think about her. Life moved on. I got married, settled down, and eventually moved into a quiet house with a little yard. We adopted a dog, this clumsy mutt that always knocked over his food bowl and barked at delivery trucks. Natalie faded into the background, just one of those chaotic friends from a different time. Every now and then, someone from that group would mention her in passing. Remember that bachelorette drama? Or, I wonder what happened to Natalie. But no one stayed in close touch. She wasn't on social media anymore, or if she was, she'd changed accounts. A few of the girls said they'd heard she moved cities. One even said she'd gotten into trouble, but nobody had solid info. I figured she'd burned out or reinvented herself. Either way, it wasn't my problem. Then came April Fool's Day. I remember because we were having a lazy morning, and my boyfriend, well, technically fiancé still, but we called each other husband and wife by then, joked that we should prank a couple of our friends. Something harmless. I smiled, said okay, and went back to cooking dinner. We had a couple friends coming over later for board games and wine. Around 9 p.m., the dog started growling at the hallway. He does that sometimes, so I didn't think much of it. My boyfriend checked the front door, nothing there. We laughed and went back to the kitchen. But an hour later, he said he saw something weird on the hallway camera. We have a cheap security system, one of those motion-triggered setups with a few indoor cameras just for peace of mind. He said the one by the coat closet blinked on, like something moved right in front of it. I figured maybe it was the dog, or one of us passing by earlier. But he pulled it up on his phone, rewound the clip, and paused it. "Look," he said, "right there." It was a short clip, maybe 3 seconds. The closet door, normally shut, was slightly open. It shifted, not all the way, just a few inches. Enough to register motion. Then it stopped. Nothing else. No footsteps, no visible person. Just that tiny movement. I said maybe the door wasn't latched properly and a draft nudged it. He didn't buy it. He replayed the clip, zoomed in, turned up the brightness. "Something's off," he said. I told him to check it then, just to be sure. He grabbed the flashlight and headed toward the hall. The dog followed, tail low. I stood by the kitchen, listening. The floor creaked under his steps. I heard the closet door creak open fully, then silence. He called back, "There's nothing in here." I came to the hallway. The closet was open wide now, coat swaying slightly from being moved. He was shining the flashlight inside, checking behind boxes and bags. Nothing seemed out of place. No signs of anyone hiding, nothing disturbed. I still thought it was probably nothing. Maybe the dog bumped it earlier and the system picked up the delayed motion. But my boyfriend didn't let it go. He checked the rest of the footage from that day. Nothing strange before that clip. All still. He put the alert system on high sensitivity for the night just in case. We locked the doors again, even though we already had. Windows too. It was past midnight by then. I turned off the oven, wiped the counters, and went to let the dog out one last time before bed. He stepped into the yard, sniffed around, and froze near the back fence. I called him. He didn't move. Then he started barking like crazy, full panic mode. I ran out to grab him, and my boyfriend followed, carrying the flashlight again. He lit up the yard. Nothing. No animal. No person. But when we walked back toward the house, the motion light in the hallway blinked on again. Just for a second. We turned on the camera feed from the hallway again, this time streaming it live on my phone, and both of us just froze. Something was definitely moving deep inside the closet. Not a shadow, not dust or a trick of the light. Something was shifting in there, slowly, deliberately. My first thought was maybe a burglar, or maybe some desperate homeless person broke in and found a place to hide. But the way it moved, it wasn't random. It felt too intentional, too familiar. I didn't want to go near it, and my boyfriend didn't either. We both knew it wasn't smart to try to deal with whoever was in there ourselves, especially if they were armed or unstable. He whispered that we should call the police. I nodded, and while I dialed, I lowered the phone for a second. That's when we heard it. A dull thump from the hallway, not loud, just enough to feel wrong. Then, behind the wall, floorboards creaked, soft, but clearly footsteps. My boyfriend moved toward the living room door to close it, maybe just trying to create some kind of barrier between us and the hallway. As he reached out, the closet door slowly creaked open. It wasn't the wind. It didn't swing. It opened. She stepped out. Natalie. At first, I didn't believe it. My brain couldn't match what I was seeing with the person I remembered. She looked like she'd been living in a cave. Old clothes, filthy hair sticking to her face, a kitchen knife clutched in one hand. Her eyes were locked onto me like I wasn't even human. She whispered, "Why did you leave me?" My legs wouldn't move. I just stared at her. She stood half-crouched, like an animal ready to pounce. Her voice was thin, almost broken, but her grip on the knife was tight. I realized she must have been hiding in the house. For how long, I had no idea. My boyfriend stepped in front of me, half blocking her path, and she didn't even flinch. Her eyes were stuck on me. "Why did you all leave me there?" she said again, louder. Natalie's entire face twisted as she stepped forward. She looked completely gone. Not just drunk or high. Not even angry in a normal way. She was locked in something deep and personal and boiling over. The knife stayed low in her hand as she inched toward me, muttering that we abandoned her when she needed us most. That nobody cared. That nobody even called. I said her name softly. I tried to talk, to tell her no one meant to hurt her, that she made the choice to stay behind. She cut me off, shouting now. About betrayal. About watching our lives get better while hers collapsed. About the years of silence. About April Fool's Day of all things, being the perfect day to make us feel what she'd felt. "I was alone," she hissed, "and you all laughed like I didn't exist." I couldn't get another word in. She was shaking, her voice rising, steps getting faster. She raised the knife, not in a full swing, but more like a warning. My boyfriend stepped back, trying to shield me, but I could see he was hesitating. That's when we heard it. The sirens. Sharp, rising fast. She froze for a second. Just a second. Then she spun and bolted toward the back of the house. My boyfriend moved fast. He ran through the side hallway and cut her off before she could reach the rear door. She lashed out, a quick swing with the knife. Not wild, but close. Then the front door burst open. 2 cops moved in, guns drawn but steady. One yelled, "Drop it!" She didn't. But she didn't charge either. One of the officers approached from the side, slow and deliberate. My boyfriend backed off. I stood still, breath caught. She looked at me one last time. Then the officers rushed her. The knife hit the floor with a clatter. They pinned her against the wall, cuffed her, and pulled her out. She didn't scream. Didn't fight. Just looked empty. I stood in the living room, shaking, while they walked her out. Her face turned once more, eyes catching mine. There was no rage anymore, just something hollow, like someone who finally ran out of energy. I couldn't stop seeing flashes of old memories, her laughing in bars, dancing on tables, telling stories too loudly. Back then, she was just loud and dramatic. I never thought it would come to this. Later, we found out she'd lost everything after that night. She fought with her family, burned bridges with friends, eventually lost her job and apartment. There were reports of her sleeping in abandoned buildings. When no one reached out, she convinced herself we'd all turned on her. She blamed us for everything, especially me. The police said she'd been stalking me for weeks, watching the house, learning routines. She slipped in during the day once, through the unlocked back door, and stayed hidden. Ate scraps, slept in the attic, sometimes in the basement, and eventually, the closet. I didn't hear her, not once. I didn't get hurt physically, not a scratch. But that didn't mean I was okay. For weeks, I couldn't sleep properly. I kept checking the closet doors at night, double locking the windows, leaving lights on. Even now, months later, I sometimes think I hear something shift behind a door. April Fools used to be my favorite dumb holiday. Now it just reminds me that someone I used to laugh with wanted to hurt me, and almost did. I went to college with Lucas. He got into photography during our second year, while I was more into organizing campus events, fundraisers, music nights, stuff like that. We weren't close, but we got along fine. He was one of those quiet, helpful guys who mostly stayed in the background, always lugging a camera around. After college, we didn't hang out, but we followed each other on social media, left the occasional like or comment. That kind of friendship. When it came time for my wedding, I was trying to keep the budget tight. Venue, catering, the whole thing was expensive. I remembered Lucas and thought, why not ask him to take the photos? Seemed better than spending a few thousand on a full package. I messaged him, and he replied fast, sounded excited, said he'd love to do it, and even suggested adding some creative shots, since the wedding landed on April Fool's Day. I figured he meant some lighthearted jokes or funny edits. I didn't ask for details, just said sure. The ceremony was held in a small countryside hotel with a garden, about an hour's drive from the city. The place had this rustic charm, wooden beams, stone walls, ivy everywhere. My wife got ready in one of the upstairs suites, and I stayed downstairs with the guys. Lucas arrived early, walking around with his Canon, snapping details, the rings, the dress hanging on the closet door, the table settings. He didn't stop moving. At one point, I saw him lying on the ground trying to catch some low-angle shot of the ceremony arch. I even joked, "Man, you're gonna break your back doing all this." He just laughed and said, "Gotta get the perfect shot." Guests loved him. He was polite, offered to take group photos for everyone, even helped an elderly aunt with her chair. Throughout the day, he seemed everywhere. Behind the buffet table, crouched by the dance floor, even outside in the garden while kids ran around with balloons. I remember thinking he'd done a better job than some pros I'd seen at other weddings. At the end of the night, he gave me a quick nod, said he'd need a few days to sort through everything and do edits. A week passed. I texted Lucas to ask when we might see the photos. He said he was still processing, wanted to make them look really polished. Fair enough, I thought. He wasn't being paid, so I didn't want to rush him. Another few days passed. I messaged again. He replied with something like, "Almost done. Just color grading and touch-ups left." It sounded convincing. Then I got the first email. It was from a random address I didn't recognize. No subject line. The message just said, "I have photos your wife wouldn't want shared." No name, no context. I thought it was spam or some messed up phishing scam. Deleted it right away. The next day, another email. Different address. Private photos. Maybe don't let others see them. Again, no signature, no threat, just this vague message. I started to feel uneasy, but still told myself it was just someone trying to mess around. My wife didn't notice anything. She was busy with post-wedding thank you cards and getting back to work. Then the third email came. It had an attachment. There was no message this time. Just a zip file and the subject line, "See for yourself." I hesitated for a few minutes before downloading it, scanned it for viruses, then opened it. Inside were several photos. They weren't staged or posed. They were shots from the bridal suite upstairs, clearly taken without her knowing. My wife was changing into her wedding dress. One photo showed her in her bra, looking away, mid-step. Another from behind as she adjusted the straps of her dress. None of them were explicit, but they were clearly private, and clearly taken without permission. I stared at the images for a long time, not really sure what to do next. I checked the timestamps. Same morning as the wedding. Same room she'd been in. Same damn day. I went through our guest list in my head. No one had any reason to be up there except her and her bridesmaids. And Lucas. He'd been there earlier, saying he wanted to take some getting ready shots. I remembered seeing him in the hallway, chatting with one of her friends, holding his camera with that lens that looked way too long for a small room. I didn't say anything to my wife right away. I just told her I was still waiting for the official photos and that Lucas needed more time. That night, I went back through my messages with him. Tried to see if he ever mentioned where he was during those hours. Nothing unusual. He was careful. The next day, another email came. This time the message said, "She looks good. Want me to keep them private? Or should I share?" I felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. Who the hell would do something like this? I sat my wife down and told her everything. She went pale. We stared at the screen in silence for a long time, and then she started crying. Not loud, just this sharp, broken sound that I'd never heard from her before. I forwarded the emails and the photos to my own inbox, then deleted everything from the computer just in case. That night we talked to her parents first, then mine. Everyone was shaken. Her dad wanted to call the police immediately, but I wasn't ready for that yet. I didn't even know what I was dealing with. I called Lucas the next morning, tried to keep my voice normal. Told him someone had gotten access to private photos of my wife from the wedding and asked if he'd noticed anyone unusual at the venue that day. Lucas sounded shocked. Said that was horrible. Asked if we were okay. Promised to go through all his files and backups in case something had been hacked. He said, "That's insane, man. I'll help however I can." Sounded real enough. I told him I was thinking it might have been someone from the hotel staff or one of the hired servers, and suddenly his tone changed. He got defensive, saying everyone there was 100% professional, and he knew them personally. Said they'd never do anything like that. The way he jumped to their defense struck me as weird. I hadn't even mentioned anyone by name. The emails kept coming. Now the sender was asking for money. Not a huge amount, 10 grand, sent in crypto, but enough to make it clear this wasn't just a prank. I replied once, asking for proof that he hadn't shared anything yet. He sent another couple of photos, more of the same. It was obvious he still had access to the originals. Lucas messaged a few times that week, asking if we were okay, if we'd found anything. I just said we were handling it. I didn't tell him about the money demand. Something in my gut was starting to turn. I kept remembering how busy he looked at the wedding, how he moved around, how he'd been in places no one else had a reason to be. I tried not to jump to conclusions, but it kept bugging me. Then, a few days later, I got a text from his number. It said, "Transfer confirmed. Hold videos for now. Wait instructions." I just stared at it. It was like someone had knocked the wind out of me. I didn't even move for a second. Then I scrolled up to double check I wasn't imagining things. It was definitely his number. A minute later, another message came in. "Sorry, ignore that last one. Autocorrect fail LOL." That was it. Nothing else. It wasn't a damn autocorrect fail. That message wasn't meant for me. I didn't reply. Instead, I started thinking about the equipment he'd brought. He had multiple cameras, tripods, and a couple of weird-looking little gadgets he said were motion sensors for cool effects. I hadn't thought much of it then, but now every little piece stood out like a red flag. I remembered him crawling behind the floral displays near the stage, and at one point placing something under one of the tables upstairs. I made a decision. I didn't tell him. I went straight to the police. They took it seriously right away, especially after I showed them the emails and the photos. They asked if I could set up a drop, offer to pay, ask for a location. I replied to the next message from the blackmailer, saying I'd pay in cash and asked for a safe handoff spot. 2 days later, I got a response. A small public parking lot near a train station, late in the evening. I agreed and followed the police's instructions. We got there early. They had undercover officers waiting, some in parked cars, one pretending to jog nearby. I had a fake envelope with play money and a small tracker inside. I stood in the open, acting nervous, checking my phone. 15 minutes later, someone showed up. It wasn't Lucas. It was a man in his mid-30s, hoodie up, face half covered with a surgical mask. He walked up to me, didn't say a word, just held out his hand. I passed him the envelope. Before he could turn around, the cops moved in. He didn't resist, just put his hands up and said, "I'm just delivering, man." At the station, they questioned him. He wasn't some criminal mastermind, just a delivery guy Lucas had hired online. Lucas had told him it was a discreet delivery for a private client and paid him in cash. But during the interview, the guy broke, said he'd overheard part of a phone call, gave the cops the number that had contacted him. It matched Lucas's. When they brought Lucas in, he didn't deny it for long. First, he tried to say it was just a joke that had gotten out of hand. Then he cracked, admitted everything, said he'd been in love with my wife for years, since college, that he'd followed our relationship on social media, that when I asked him to shoot the wedding, he saw it as a chance to capture something real. He installed small cameras in the suite where she got ready, hid them behind the curtain rod and inside a fake smoke detector, said he wanted to show her what kind of man I really was, and that she was making a mistake with me. He said the blackmail was supposed to wake her up, make her question the marriage, maybe even reach out to him for support. That was his plan. He was charged with several counts: illegal surveillance, extortion, invasion of privacy. It's all going to court. My wife gave a statement. I did too. But the damage was already deep. After everything, we tried to move on. Therapy, time off work, even a trip away. But it didn't help much. Trust was shattered, not between us, but in everyone else. We stopped letting people into our home, stopped going to social gatherings. It felt like anyone could be hiding something. Eventually, she said she needed space. I didn't argue. We're separated now, maybe not forever, but I don't know. I still blame myself for hiring him, for trusting him, for thinking he was just a quiet guy with a camera. Back in school, we had this little group of friends, just a tight bunch of us who hung out between classes, shared dumb jokes, and messed around during lunch. Among us, Ethan was the one everyone liked. He was smooth, always smiling, and just had that charm. We had a bit of a flirty thing going on back then. Nothing serious, just harmless teasing. But after graduation, he moved away and we lost touch. Life kept moving. I got a job, rented my own place, and settled into a pretty quiet routine. Every now and then, something would remind me of those days, and I'd think of Ethan, but it was just that. Old memories. Then one evening, completely out of the blue, I got a message from him on social media. He said he was back in town and asked if I wanted to grab a coffee and catch up. I was a bit surprised, but mostly curious. There was a nice wave of nostalgia about it, so I said yes. We met at this small coffee shop near the park. He looked pretty much the same, maybe a bit older in the face, but still had that easygoing vibe. He asked a lot of questions about my work, my apartment, my routines. He smiled a lot, laughed at my stories, and told me it was good to see I was doing well. I didn't think much of the fact that he didn't talk much about his own life. It felt more like a warm, casual reunion. Toward the end of the coffee, he suggested grabbing dinner sometime, and I agreed. It was almost April Fool's Day, so we joked a bit about pulling pranks like we used to in school. It was all light and fun. I figured maybe we'd keep it friendly, just old friends catching up once in a while. Over the next couple of weeks, we started seeing each other more often. It wasn't every day, but close to it. He'd call in the evenings just to say hi, bring me small things. Coffee, snacks, he said, reminded him of school lunches. Once even a candle that he said smelled like the hallway near our old lockers. It was weirdly specific, but I laughed it off. I assumed he was just being sweet in a quirky way. Sometimes I'd be heading to work and I'd get a message from him saying, "Good luck with that 9 a.m. meeting," or "Hope your lunch isn't that awful microwave pasta again." I didn't remember telling him those details, but maybe I had. Or maybe he just remembered stuff from our chats. I didn't question it much. I wanted to believe he was just being thoughtful. One Friday night, we went to this bar I used to go to with my friends. Nothing fancy, just a local place with decent music and familiar faces. As soon as we walked in, the bartender Sarah spotted me and smiled. We hadn't talked in a while, but we recognized each other. I introduced her to Ethan and she nodded, polite but not particularly friendly. A bit later in the evening, when Ethan went to grab a table, Sarah leaned across the bar and asked quietly, "Hey, are you here with that guy?" I nodded, confused. She looked at me for a second, like she was trying to figure out how to say something. Then she said, "You're not, like, worried about him or anything?" I kind of laughed, caught off guard. "What? No, why?" She hesitated, glanced around like she didn't want to be overheard. Then she said, "He came in here last year, a few times, asked a bunch of questions about you, like what nights you usually come in, who you hang out with, whether you ever mention a boyfriend. He even asked if you lived nearby." She paused. It was weird enough I remembered. I frowned, tried to piece it together. "Are you sure it was him?" Sarah nodded. "Pretty sure. I didn't know his name then, but yeah, that's him. I thought he might have just been some creep. When you walked in with him today, I was surprised." I stared at her for a moment, trying to process it. My first instinct was to laugh it off. Maybe she had him confused with someone else. Maybe he really was just being friendly. I told her that and waved it off, made a joke about him being a high school stalker. But even as I said it, I felt a weird weight settle in my stomach. Ethan came back to the bar, handed me a drink, and asked what we were talking about. I just said Sarah was an old friend. He smiled, didn't press. We sat down at a table near the back. He started talking about a new restaurant that had opened and asked if I wanted to try it sometime next week. I nodded, still thinking about what Sarah said. He was watching me. I could feel it, even though he kept smiling. I took a sip of my drink, and from the corner of my eye, I saw Sarah watching us too. The next day, I decided to bring it up. I told Ethan about what the bartender said. I expected confusion, or maybe an awkward laugh. Instead, his expression changed immediately. His face went blank, like someone shut off a light. He didn't even try to deny it. He just went quiet for a few seconds, then said, "Let's get out of town for a bit. I know a place, there's a lake, it's peaceful. You'll like it." I paused, caught off guard. "You mean now?" "Yeah," he said, already pulling out his car keys. "I'll drive. We'll grab coffee on the way." There was something off in how fast he switched the topic, but I went along. I thought maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe he didn't know how to explain it, and this was his way of handling things. I told myself not to overthink. Maybe he really had planned something nice to distract us both. We got in his car, a black sedan I hadn't seen before, and headed out of town. The traffic started thinning as we hit the outskirts, and then it was just long, open road cutting through the countryside. Fields on either side, no houses, no shops, barely another car. At first, it was quiet. I tried asking about the lake, how far it was, if he went there often. He gave short answers, kept his eyes on the road. After a while, I noticed the speed. He wasn't just driving fast, he was flying down the highway. The needle was pushing 90, maybe more. I gripped the edge of my seat and said, "Hey, can you slow down a bit?" He didn't answer, just pressed harder on the gas. "Ethan, seriously, slow down." Still nothing. His hands were tight on the wheel, his jaw clenched. I glanced at him and saw that his eyes weren't calm anymore. They looked sharp, focused, like he wasn't even really listening to me. I sat back, trying to stay calm, watching the trees blur past. My phone had no signal. The dashboard showed 0 bars. The highway signs had stopped a while ago. Then he finally spoke. Quiet, flat. I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted to keep up with your life. That's all. I looked at him. What are you talking about? He didn't turn. I saved some pictures, just for memories. I didn't hurt you. I never planned to. I just watched. Just wanted to be near. My stomach dropped. I stayed silent. I know your routines, he continued, like he was explaining a schedule to a coworker. Monday laundry, Thursday groceries. You go to that bookstore on Saturdays, but you never buy anything. I stared at the road. My hands were cold. He added, sometimes I'd see you through your window. You'd leave your curtains open at night. That wasn't safe. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. My mind was racing, but I didn't want to set him off. We hit a curve, the road twisting through low hills. The tires screeched slightly, but he didn't slow down. I reached for the side door, pretending to adjust my seat. No signal still. Can you please slow down? I said again. It's not safe like this. He didn't. His eyes flicked toward me, then back to the road. It felt like he was waiting for something. Like he was watching for a reaction. Then it happened. We hit a sharp bend, and the car started to slide. The back tires lost grip, the whole body shifted sideways, and in a split second we were spinning off the road. There was a loud crunch as we slammed into the ditch, front first. Metal twisted, glass cracked. The airbags exploded into our faces. Everything went white for a second. Then silence. I was still in the seat, heart pounding, head ringing. My door was crushed but not jammed. I pushed it open and stumbled out. My legs felt numb, but I could stand. Ethan was groaning, his head against the steering wheel. About 15 minutes later, another car passed and pulled over. A guy ran out with a phone, calling for help. An ambulance came first, then a highway patrol vehicle. The EMTs checked us out quickly, then turned to the car. One of the officers opened the trunk while the other took Ethan aside. A few minutes later, I saw 2 officers looking through a black duffel bag they pulled from the back seat. They started pulling out photos, printed ones, dozens. Some of me at the bus stop, some from across the street near my apartment. One looked like it was taken through my living room window. Others were older, from years back. Different clothes, different places. Some were clearly from a distance, others were zoomed in. I just stood there. One of the officers came over and asked me if I had any idea he'd been following me for that long. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head. When they questioned Ethan, he didn't deny it. He calmly explained that he'd kept a visual log over the years. That he was just observing, nothing harmful. The police weren't buying it. They called it stalking, said the photos and his notes were enough to press charges. He had written dates, times, even some names, friends of mine, neighbors. One entry mentioned my spare key spot under the balcony plant. They cuffed him on the spot and drove him away. I was taken to the hospital for a minor head injury and bruised ribs. Since then, I've had to change my number, move apartments, and even take a few weeks off work. I still can't believe I sat in a car with someone who'd been watching me like that for years. Someone I thought I used to know. The worst part is, it didn't feel like a stranger. It felt like someone I'd invited back in. Someone I trusted for a second too long. It didn't seem like anything serious at first. I mean, Dylan and I had been best friends since we were kids. Grew up on the same street, went to the same school, even dated girls from the same friend groups. Summers were always about fishing, every single year since we were 10. So when he invited me out for a surprise fishing trip around April Fool's, I didn't think twice. He said he had something funny planned, and I figured it was just some dumb prank like always. A couple of years ago, I did mess up his old boat. It was a windy afternoon, and I was trying to dock us while he handled the rods. I misjudged the angle and slammed the side hard into the pier. The hull cracked, and the repair cost him more than he admitted at the time. I felt awful, offered to split the cost, but he brushed it off. Said it was just fiberglass and bad luck. We didn't talk about it again. When he showed up that morning with a brand new boat, I joked about it being a serious upgrade. He laughed, said, "Yeah, and you're not touching the wheel this time." I laughed too. It didn't feel weird then. We packed up early, just before 6 a.m. The sky was clear, and the air was cold enough that you could see your breath. He brought the rods, a cooler full of bait and sandwiches, and a metal thermos for coffee. I helped load everything in and noticed how spotless the boat was. Not a single scratch. Looked like it had never been used. I made a comment, and he just shrugged. "Got it a few weeks ago," he said. "Haven't taken it out yet. Figured we'd break it in right." We pushed off just as the sun started coming up. The lake was dead calm, and for the first hour or so, everything was normal. We set up near the middle of the lake, threw in lines, and talked about work, his sister's wedding coming up, some guy I knew who got fired for stealing gas cards. Same kind of talk we always had. At one point he opened a beer, and I joked that it was too early for that. He said, "It's always 5 o'clock on the lake." Classic Dylan line. Around 2 hours in, I noticed something off with the motor. It was subtle, just a weird, irregular noise every few seconds, like a hiccup or knock. I asked him about it, and he glanced back, then said it was nothing. "Probably just water hitting the prop," he told me. I wasn't so sure, but I let it go. He offered me coffee and pointed at the thermos by the bench. I turned to pour myself a cup. The coffee smelled strong, almost bitter, but hot. I took a sip and turned around, and that's when I saw that the motor was off. We weren't drifting too much because the water was flat, but it caught my attention. Dylan was standing at the back, looking over the edge. He said, "Think something's wrapped around the prop. I'm gonna check it out." I didn't say anything at first. Just watched as he crouched and fiddled with the rear panel. Then he stood up and looked at me. "Motor's screwed. I'll take the rescue float to the closest dock and call for help," he said. "It's not far, and we'll be back in like 30. I stared at him, confused. "You sure we can't just fix it here?" He shook his head. "Nah, better not mess with it. Could make it worse." I didn't argue. It sounded off. He was usually the kind of guy to patch things up on the spot. But he already had the orange rescue ring out and was pulling the rope free. Then, without saying much else, he climbed in and started paddling away. As soon as Dylan paddled out of view, I felt something shift under my foot. A soft, wet sound, like fabric sticking to plastic. I looked down and saw water pooling near the center of the floor. At first, I thought maybe we'd taken on a little splash when he climbed out. But within minutes, it was clear this wasn't normal. The water wasn't stopping. It was slowly rising. I dropped the coffee and started checking every corner of the boat, crawling around with my hands flat on the floor. That's when I found it, near the back, under a fold-down panel. A valve, half loose. A part that should have been sealed tight. It wasn't just a leak. It was tampered with. I twisted it shut with all my strength and pressed down to test it, but the water kept seeping in. Slower now, but steady. I grabbed a small plastic container from the bait box and started bailing water. Scoop, dump, scoop, dump. It wasn't enough. I checked my phone. 1 bar. I tried calling Dylan. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. I sat back, breathing hard, the heat rising. My shirt clung to me with sweat and lake spray. He wasn't coming back. That much was obvious now. I tried texting him, just in case. "There's water in the boat. I'm not joking. Call me." Nothing. I looked out toward where he paddled off. No sign of him, no sound. Just quiet lake and sky. For the next hour, I rotated between bailing water and trying to get the valve tighter. It didn't help. I tried calling 911, but the signal blinked out before the call connected. I held my phone above my head like an idiot, turning in circles trying to catch another bar. Nothing stuck long enough. As time passed, the sun got hotter. The calm lake that looked peaceful in the morning now felt like an endless trap. I stripped off my jacket, tore one sleeve off, and tied it to a fishing rod. Raised it like a flag. It flopped uselessly in the breeze. I sat in the middle of the boat, water slowly licking the edges of my shoes, and kept scooping it out like a machine. My arms burned from the motion, but I couldn't stop. The moment I slowed down, it crept higher. I started shouting, just in case anyone was near. Nothing. No response, no boats, no planes, no birds. Just sun and water. Hours passed. The boat sat lower now, and the heat was crushing. My mouth was dry like sand. My arms moved slower. I tried tearing off my bright red jacket, waving it over my head, anything. I even arranged fishing tackle into rough letters spelling SOS across the middle bench. It didn't matter. No one saw. At some point, I curled under the side rail to get some shade. The bailing slowed. I'd get up every few minutes, dump more water out, then sink back down. My head felt like it weighed 50 pounds. Everything started blurring together. The thought of Dylan kept hitting me in flashes. The look on his face before he paddled away. Calm. Like he'd already made peace with whatever he was doing. Like it was justified. It didn't make sense. It was a boat. A mistake from 2 years ago. But the way he set everything up, the leak, the distance from shore, the way he made sure I'd be alone, it wasn't a joke. It wasn't a prank. At some point during the night, I think I blacked out for a while. The stars were above me when I opened my eyes again. The boat hadn't sunk, but the water was up to the bench now. I got up, started scooping again with whatever I could find. My hands, a Tupperware lid, anything. The lake water tasted foul, and my skin burned where it touched the sun-soaked sides. When the sun came back up the next morning, it felt like I'd lived through 2 days, not one. I tried yelling again, but my voice cracked and gave out fast. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I kept waving the rod with the jacket tied to it, but even I could barely lift it now. The wind had carried the boat further, no sign of shore in any direction. Just open water. I don't know how long I sat like that. Maybe 3-4 hours more. Long enough for the sun to get high again. I remember thinking, this is it. No one's coming. This is how it ends. Not in a car crash, not from old age. Just slowly, cooked in the middle of a lake. Then I heard the buzzing. Low at first, then louder. I turned my head toward the sound, and there it was. Small, white, slicing across the sky. A seaplane. Bright orange on the tail. I jumped up too fast, slipped, hit my knee hard on the bench, but got back up. I waved both arms, grabbed the rod, spun the jacket like a flag. I screamed even though no sound came out. It passed overhead once, didn't slow down. I thought they didn't see me. Then it banked, turned, and came back around. Lower this time. Closer. I collapsed against the side of the boat, too tired to celebrate. The rescue boat reached me maybe 20 minutes later. Two guys in uniforms pulled up alongside, shouting. I tried to respond, but my throat just rasped. One of them leaned in, grabbed my arm, and hauled me into their boat. "You're lucky," one of them said. "Another hour, and you might have gone under." They rushed me to the dock and then straight to the hospital. Dehydration, sunburn, muscle breakdown. The doctor said it was a miracle I didn't go into full organ failure. A day later, the cops came to talk. I told them everything. They already had questions. They'd spoken to Dylan, who claimed I left the lake with someone else. Said he hadn't seen me since morning. But when they checked the boat, the loose valve, the way it was damaged, they knew it wasn't an accident. When they brought him in again, he cracked fast. Said it was just a lesson, said I never really paid for what I did. Called it fair. Said he just wanted me to understand how it felt. Now he's facing attempted murder charges. The case is open. I'm back home, bandaged and moving slow, but alive. I still haven't figured out how to process it. I thought we were brothers. Turns out, he'd been waiting 2 years for revenge.